All right, looks like we are live. Welcome everybody to Standing for Truth. My name is Donny, and I am your host and moderator for tonight's creation versus evolution debate between Jamie from the Studio 215 official YouTube channel and James W. Tonight is the classic creation versus evolution debate. I'm always pumped for these kinds of debates. They're broad topic, and so it should be interesting to see what our guests for tonight, Jamie and James W., bring to the table. So, gentlemen, before we get into the epic showdown itself, let's get acquainted. Let's kind of break the ice a little bit. And James W., we'll start with you. My good man, been a little while since you've been here, but you're definitely no stranger to debates, nor are you a stranger to this channel. So how have you been? A little bit about yourself and a little bit about your channel.
Thanks, Donnie. It's good to be back. I always enjoy coming on the platform here. Thank you, Jamie, for proposing this debate. I think it's going to be a lot of fun. So I'm James W., YouTuber. I am a counter-apologist. I co-host a channel on the Amy Newman channel, youtube.com/Amy Newman. And yeah, we do several episodes a week. We do a Bible study. We do tackle various theological topics and pseudoscience topics, and we have a lot of fun. We keep it fun and comedy-minded. So if you, it sounds like something you'd be interested in, check it out. We'll be doing an after show after this debate, open mic. Everybody's welcome to come on. Let us know what you think. And yeah, thank you, Donnie.
Well, thank you, James. Sounds fun. You and Amy are always great hosts. And so I've got your channel linked in the description box for people to check out. Jamie, good to have you back as well. How have you been? A little bit about yourself and a little bit about Studio 215 official.
Yeah, so I used to be an evolutionist myself, and then I evolved common sense. So here I am, standing for creation. On my channel, I make several different video series. The big video series that people seem to like is the Evolution Exposed, which I'm currently working on episode 3 right now. Also, I do weekly Bible studies. So every week we do the Bible study on my Discord. And then the following week, I will post the chapter that we covered during the Discord. I'll post that on the channel for those that couldn't make it to the live session. Also working on a bunch of different documentaries. Although I got a lot of projects going on, so I try not to announce too much at one time because I don't want people to get excited for something and then I don't get around to it for a couple months. But yeah, a lot of content over there, so go check out the studio.
Okay, Jamie, I appreciate that introduction. For the audience, if you like what you're hearing from our guests tonight and you want to see more from them, again, go to the description box. You can find James and Amy's channel. You can find Jamie's channel as well with lots of great content. And with that, let me go over the format briefly. So we are going to have a semi-formal, informal debate. We are going to be having some good discussion. So, but we'll start off with 12-minute opening statement. James W. is going to start with that. And then we've got 8-minute uninterrupted rebuttals. And then this is where we jump into an open discussion, roughly 45 to 50 minutes. I'll make sure that we're hitting on all of the major points that are brought up in the openings and rebuttals. Then we'll have a 5-minute concluding statement where the debaters can wrap up their thoughts and points. And then this is where we get you guys in the audience involved. We're going to have a roughly 25 or 30-minute audience Q&A. So please, again, the topic is creation versus evolution. And so if you have questions for the debaters, tag me either at Donny or at Standing for Truth. Let me know who the question is for, and I'll save them. We'll have some fun during that portion. So with that, James, we are going to hand it over to you. And whenever you're ready, the floor is yours. You've got 12 minutes. Oh, I think you're on mute, James.
Good. Can you hear me?
Yes. Sound good.
Sounds good. All right. Thank you, Donnie. So, I've been on the channel several times before. So as most of you heard before, I used to be a Christian until about 9 years ago, coming up on 9 years this year, where I gave my life over to reason and faith and science, not faith, which is where I was before. So the fundamental question we have to ask ourselves at the beginning of this debate is, who knows more about human biology, about biology in general? People from the Bronze Age, Iron Age, or modern scientists? And that really is the quintessential question that we have to ask ourselves. Kind of a silly question. What exactly did ancient man know more about compared to modern man? Except perhaps ancient man knew more about ancient man. They knew more about myths and superstition, about mythology. But did they know any more about science than we did? I don't think so. And I realize that my opponents on here, they have a very unique view of human history. They tend to think that people long ago were much smarter than we are. They don't really have any evidence of that, but it's in their books, so they go with it. Anyway, human language, we know, did not originate from Babel. There was no global flood, and a talking snake did not foil an omnipotent God's perfect plan. Men did not originate from the Middle East, and no, animal life was not poofed into existence by a genie. Those are all mythology. We don't have to cling to those today. We know better. Ancient man didn't know any better. They have an excuse. We don't. So I understand that if you hang out on channels like this one a lot, if you subscribe to the Young Earth ideology, then you would probably get the idea that at the major universities and science labs around the world that the scientists are frantically working to prop up this evolution theory, like they are just doing anything and it's on its way out, and creationism will be accepted shortly. Well, I mean, obviously that couldn't be further from the truth, but it seems to be the sentiment, the feeling I get when I go onto Young Earth Creationist channels. But yeah, unfortunately, for you guys, it's not based on reality. And what these channels try to do is they take two puzzle pieces that don't fit together, the Bible and reality, and they just try and force those two pieces to fit together. And it's obvious to anybody who hasn't agreed that they fit together from the start that they don't fit together. But alas, here we are. You know, there's overwhelming evidence that the world is round, yet the flat earthers continue to make their silly arguments against it that only convince them. Young Earth creationism is like flat Earth is to geography, to biology. Anyway, why would we want to just take a book and assume it to be absolute truth at a priori? Why would we want to do that? Well, because it's the book that has been believed in the culture we found ourselves to be in. Well, because your parents believed it, and their parents believed it, and their parents believed it for quite a long time. Well, you know, you don't have to go too far back in that chain until you get to a point where they believed it. But that belief was by force. It was not voluntary. When the Christian church was strong, you could not dissent from it. You could not go around saying, I don't think the global flood was true. I don't believe in creationism. Or you would find yourself in very serious trouble. You could be executed. But what happened? Well, Christianity, they all go by the same book. They all read it. They all claim to believe it, yet they don't seem to agree about anything. So Christians started to schism. We had the Protestant Reformation. We had the Reformation in England. The church no longer had that stranglehold of power over the secular institutions that it once held. You started to be able to question things. They didn't have the power to repress dissent the way that they did in the past. And what happened after that? Well, we had the Age of Enlightenment. We started making amazing scientific discoveries. We started learning more about the natural world in a matter of decades than we had in centuries. It was an amazing time of human achievement that we're still reaping the benefits of today. Now, there were a lot of people who went out at the time. They were devout Christians. They believed in the Bible. And they believed it so much, they had so much faith that they thought when they looked at the natural world, they expected it would confirm what the Bible had taught. So they went out looking for evidence to confirm the Bible. And to their surprise, they found something else. They found an earth that is much older than what the Bible would allude to, a literal interpretation would allude to. They made all sorts of discoveries that seemed to contradict that. We figured out that actually Moses was not real. Those were just stories. We began to learn how the Bible was put together, and that it was compiled in the Old Testament many centuries after the time that they had purported that it was actually written. So what did these people do? They had a choice to make. They could either go with reality, or they could go with the Bible and try to force reality to fit the Bible. Now, to their credit, we owe them a lot because they decided to go with reality. They decided to force the theology to bend to reality as opposed to the other way around. And so they affirmed what they saw in the natural world as real. And if it contradicted what the Bible says, too bad. And the Bible's wrong. And moving into evolution, so of course we have begins with Charles Darwin. He began to make observations about speciation. The different animals live in different places, and he began to connect that to natural selection, to the environment selecting organisms based on their traits. Animals with certain traits will do better in an environment. The environment selects for that trait. It will become dominant in the area. And they kind of accept all that. They're okay with that. But the thing is that working on a 6,000 year time scale that they're stuck to, yeah, that's not enough time for large macroscopic changes. But as we found out, the Earth is much, much, much older than that. And when you have these evolutionary changes, you have these mutations, you have changes that come about through sexual selection and recombination of genes as a byproduct of sexual reproduction that produces new organisms. Over time, these tiny changes can add up to large macroscopic changes. And we don't have to guess about that. We don't, because we can look in the ground, in the fossil record. We have a history of life on Earth preserved in rock. And you'll find that if we look in the rocks that are newest, you find animals that are very, very similar to what we have today. Maybe a few differences here or there, but largely similar. And as you get older and older, you're going to see less and less similarity. Animals are less and less diverse. They're more alike the further back that you go. And of course, this is not consistent with the model of a genie poofing them out. This is consistent with uniformitarianism, the idea that while catastrophes and radical changes do happen on the Earth, the large bulk of what we see is long processes taking place on the Earth over a very long period of time. For example, look at the Grand Canyon. Look at that. Now, they're going to tell you that, well, that's a washed out spillway. The water just gushed right through and carved all that out. Really? I mean, kind of look at that river. It kind of snakes very slowly up and down along its path. Kind of just looks like water taking the path of least resistance, doesn't it? Yeah, that's the most logical answer, as opposed to a large, massive amount of water just carving right through everything. But that's not what we see. That's not what we see in the natural world. And it's not going to be what we see in the natural world. You know, mainstream science has moved on from this a long time ago, and they're leaving young Earth creationism in the dust. It actually falls to kind of people like us, me, and the others in our community to try and rebut some of these ideas, because they're not looking back in the mainstream science. They're not questioning this because it's been established a long time ago. They are using evolution. They are making new discoveries, and they're not looking back. And, 100 years from now, evolution will still be taught in every academic institution that is worth anything. Young Earth creationism will be taught in none. It will probably still be believed by a small fringe, certainly smaller than today. But yeah, there's going to be no sign of Jesus coming back. None of these prophecies are going to happen. There's not going to be a new temple built, because, unfortunately for you guys, it's all mythology. And if it does happen, I'll be the first to admit I was wrong, but I'm not banking on that. So I'm going to try to keep things as simple as possible tonight. This is obviously it's a very broad topic. There's so many different avenues we could get into. But what I really want to hear from Jamie is I want to hear what are his hurdles? What is his stumbling block? What is it about this that he isn't getting? And maybe we could try and clear things up, because the job of these professional young Earth creationists is not to try to understand evolution.
Oh, looks like James is frozen for more than a few seconds there. We'll wait for him to reconnect. Could be his modem, but he did freeze at the just over 11-minute mark. And so he's got about less than a minute left. We will wait for him to reconnect. And I do want to let the audience know that we will be doing an audience Q&A. And I see questions coming in already. And so, yes, I can hear you, James. You froze right at about the 11-minute mark. Can you hear me? Am I coming in okay? No, you might have to. It might be a good idea, James, if you were to leave the stream and then make your way back in. Just kind of refresh everything. Unless we're coming in okay right now. But as he does that, let me go over a few reminders. So Jamie, as a matter of fact, we've got his debate rescheduled with Taylor from Snake Was Right on the 17th. So that's going to be fun. Debate on Cladomonas. I enjoy the hyper-specific debates as well, and so that seems to be a hot topic these days. Jamie and Taylor, they've had a round one on that, but that was a couple months ago at least. And so round two, I think, is going to be a lot of fun. We've had a few debates already this week. We had an epic debate on biology and evolution last night. We had a debate on dispensationalism a couple nights ago. Tonight, of course, creation versus evolution. We'll be back here on Saturday as well for a debate on the King James Bible, but specifically unicorn. Is unicorn the wrong translation? With that, I see James W. back here. James, we'll do a quick test.
First actual evidence of God. He tried to silence me, but yet I'm back.
Oh, you're back, and you do have about, I'm not sure if you wanted to wrap things up in the last 30 seconds that you had when you went out, or did you want to kind of wrap it up there?
I want to hear what Jamie has to say, that we can move into the discussion. We can actually get things moving.
Get into the meat. Okay, well, James, I appreciate the opening statement, the 12-minute opening statement. We are now going to hand it over to Jamie from Studio 215 Official. Jamie, whenever you're ready, the floor is yours, and you've got 12 minutes. Go ahead.
Yeah, so I thought we were going to be debating science tonight. It seems like all he did was attack Christianity and discuss philosophy. So keep in mind, philosophy and science are not the same thing. Northampton.edu actually says this word for word in their opening statements for philosophy. So I would recommend you go look at that article. I can put the link in the chat as well. But yeah, since you want to talk about philosophy, I took some notes here. First, you said Bronze Age, Iron Age. You always say this in your debates. Does ancient man know more than us? I would actually be willing to argue that. Yes, they did know more than us. They clearly understood astrology more than us because they knew how to align the stars. They understood things about the stars that we don't even understand today. So it seems like we lost knowledge of that. Another thing is their architecture. Their architecture was spectacular. To this day, we still have people that cannot figure out how to replicate the pyramids. There have been people that tried to replicate the pyramids and failed. Also, we have some of the smartest archaeologists in the world that are just trying to figure out how they did those pyramids. Instead of replicating them, they're trying to figure out how they did them, and they've come up with hundreds of theories, and none of them seem to be able to move the bricks the way they did. Another thing is that there is records on hieroglyphs that show that they did brain surgeries. There's records that show they had electricity that was based off of electric eels inside of pools that basically fed the royalty of the city electricity. So yeah, I would be willing to argue that the Bronze Age, Iron Age is actually a lot smarter than we are today. In fact, we think that we're smart, but it seems like we're getting dumber based on the fact that we rely on technology for our intelligence. I'm willing to bet that you wouldn't be able to recite very much of what you learned in school off the top of your head. You would be able to look it up on your phone, but that doesn't mean that's your knowledge. That's the phone's knowledge. So that's the first talking point. Let me go ahead and check that one off. The next talking point he had was, he says the Bible and reality aren't compatible. And I think that's hilarious that he's talking about reality here. Because obviously, I'm going to bring up the point that the Bible says he made them male and female. So I would ask you, what is a woman? If you have a good grasp on reality, that should be an easy question to answer. I won't go too deep into that because I don't want to get us flagged. But who has the reality here? As far as reality, keep in mind that according to the Bible, there is an absolute truth to the world. That means that we have a foundation that we can base our understanding of the world around us on. According to evolutionists and atheists, that foundation of truth is not absolute. What they say is this is my truth, or this is their truth. No, that is not truth. If you say this is my truth, but it doesn't align with the absolute truth, then guess what? That's your opinion, not your truth. So I think you're the one that is not fully grasping reality here. The next point that he made was that Christianity had a grasp on the world and it controlled the world, but then they sort of fell apart and they lost their superiority, and that's why science is now taking over. No, actually, Christianity is alive and well. It's not going anywhere. It never will go anywhere. The only way it's going to go anywhere is if you persecute us and actually exterminate us. That's the only way we're going to go away. So you can expect to see us for a very long time. Now, you were trying to talk about all these bad things that Christians did in the past, but I don't think you understand Christianity, because all the bad things that happened in the past that you referenced were from Catholicism. Catholicism is not Christianity. They have more books than us. Roughly 40% of the books that they have in agreement with us Christians, they change 40% of that text to completely change the doctrines. Their 10 commandments aren't even the same. So no, Catholics and Christians are not the same thing. If there's any Catholics watching right now and you want to debate that topic, I'd be more than glad to debate that topic with you. But Catholicism is rooted in Roman paganism with a little bit of Christianity spiced onto it as a cover-up. But really, the Catholic's job is to make Christians look bad. And judging on the statements you made, I would say that they succeeded in convincing you. The next thing I want to talk about is he said they all read from the same Bible and they all disagree. Well, that's not exactly true. I'm sure that you've watched hours of Kent's videos because you seem to be basing your talking points off of Kent Hovind's arguments. But what you're saying is that all Bibles are the same, and that's absolutely not true. I can show you hundreds of verses that disagree with each other, and that's because the Jesuits of Catholicism, their whole job was to confuse the Bible. So they are constantly coming out with new versions that change doctrines, and that's why we have so many different branches of Christianity, and most of them are actually following a false gospel. The next thing you said was, we know the age of the earth, we know the age of the earth, and you always say this, we know this, we know that, we know the age of the earth, we know that animals evolve, so we just have to prove it. That's not how science works, okay? You don't know something and then prove it. You theorize something, you make a hypothesis, and then you attempt to use science to prove that hypothesis. However, you guys are doing it backwards. You're coming to a conclusion based on your philosophy of evolution, and then you're trying to use that philosophy of evolution to then structure everything you do in science. And the thing is that has actually been a hindrance to science, because all the money that we have wasted on evolution, which is a theory based on philosophy, which is essentially a religion, all of that money could have been put into much more beneficial fields of study. So yeah, the age of the earth, you don't know the age of the earth. You base that off of radiometric dating. Radiometric dating is completely fraudulent. I can break down every step of radiometric dating and why it doesn't work. The other thing you base that off of is the fossils, and you say that you go to the fossils and you can date the fossils. Well, no, you can't do that either, because in order to radiometrically date anything, the Earth has to have reached a level of equilibrium with radio decay or or carbon decay. I don't remember the exact terminology for that, but there's a rate of decay to everything in the Earth that has carbon, and if we haven't reached the equilibrium for that, then the dates will range all over the place. That's what we see when we actually radiometrically date things. When we date a fossil or a rock, we can get dozens of different dates that are millions of years apart. That is actually evidence that we haven't reached equilibrium. Now, according to scientists, they have theorized, this is coming from evolutionary scientists, they theorized that the Earth would have reached the decay equilibrium in roughly 50,000 years. So the fact that we get one specimen that gets tested and has dozens of different dates to it, that actually proves that the Earth is less than 50,000 years according to the calculations of your evolutionary scientists. The next thing you said was there's a conspiracy to suppress creationism. That's our argument. That's always our argument. Well, one, I would say yes, that is somewhat true. But two, it's a failed conspiracy, because what Christians did was we decided to start our own organizations, and we don't care if you approve of them. There's plenty of organizations out there that do tons of amazing research. They use real science, and they do it to support creation. Now, just to kind of give you a couple of examples of this real conspiracy, because keep in mind, just because you use the word conspiracy doesn't mean it's not real. The word conspiracy means a plot to do harm to someone. The events of World War II in Germany, that would have been a conspiracy. Does that mean that it never happened? Absolutely not. It did happen. It was a conspiracy, but it was a real conspiracy. This is another example of a real conspiracy. Now, if you look up different foundations that support evolution specifically, you'll find Freedom from Religion Foundation. You'll find the National Center for Science Education, ran by Eugenie Scott. And inside of their introduction paragraph to their website of the foundation, they actually say that their entire goal is to keep creation out of science. So yes, I would say that that is a conspiracy to suppress the Christian side of evidence that is being presented. So it's not that there is no evidence, it's that you don't want that evidence to come to light. And no matter how hard you try, God's going to win, and he's going to let that evidence come to light. So I don't really care whether or not you want to believe it. The next thing he said was, we can observe evolution in the fossils. I kind of already talked about that. No, you can't observe evolution in the fossils. And actually, I have a whole presentation on fossils. I made a video that's actually episode 2 of my video series, Evolution Exposed. If y'all want to go check it out, go to my YouTube channel and go look up the Evolution Exposed playlist. There's only 2 episodes on there right now, but episode 2 is called Flaws of Reconstruction. And I break down in great detail how even the most secular of evolutionary scientists will admit that this is all based on assumptions. It's all speculation and imagination. Okay. You take a couple of bones that are maybe at max are 30% of the specimen you're creating, right? So you get these little fragments of bones. You create an entire creature out of these fragments of bones that has never been seen before. So you can't even observe this being accurate. And then you use that to connect it to existing animals. That's not how science works. I'm sorry. If you want to get into fossils, I would be glad to, because that's actually the original topic that I wanted to debate with you. So I have almost an entire presentation just on fossils if you'd like to do that. The next thing was, this wasn't from you directly, but it was actually from Creationist Crybaby in the chat. And he said, explain vestigial structures and how they lost their main function. First point I would make on that is losing function is the opposite of evolution. That's de-evolution. You're losing something, not gaining something. The second point I would make is, how do you know that it had a main function that was lost in the first place? Maybe you just don't understand the functions of these organs. So a perfect example is, as Ken always says, the whale's pelvic bone. That is a pelvic bone that controls its penis, okay? That's its main function. Now you have decided to take that and try and add legs to it, but there's no evidence of legs on that animal. The only evidence of those legs is the fact that it has the pelvic bone that controls its penis, and it still is used today. So it never lost function and it never lost legs. End of story on that one. Another thing he said was, majority of scientists believe evolution. No, that's actually not true.
1 minute.
I'm almost done. Majority of scientists believe evolution. That's not true at all. The fact that majority of what is published in mainstream science supports evolution, that goes into the conspiracy where they're trying to suppress information. Plenty of creation scientists have tried to publish articles in mainstream papers, and they get denied because they won't support evolution. So yes, this is a conspiracy to suppress information. That doesn't mean that there's more evolutionists. That just means that those are the only ones that are getting approved by the peer-reviewed system, which really the peer-reviewed system is a great system of propaganda that was based out of Nazi Germany in World War II. They took the form that used for how they applied it to science in today's world. Another thing he said is he wants to know why I don't believe in evolution. The reason I don't believe in evolution is because every time I study it, every aspect I look into is disproved. The final thing I want to point out is a lot of people said that James doesn't like to have the light on. Or it's too dark. And the reason for that is probably because of what God said in Isaiah 29:15. Woe unto them that seek deep to hide their counsel from the Lord, and their works are in the dark. And they say, who seeth us and who knoweth us? It doesn't matter if your lights are off or on. You can't hide from God. He sees everything you do, and you will face his judgment one day. And that's my closing opening statement.
Okay, Jamie, thank you for the 12 minutes. That wraps up the opening statements from James and Jamie. So we're now moving into the 8-minute response section. This will be uninterrupted, and then we'll get into some discussion where we can tackle each point one by one. And so, James, whenever you're ready, you have 8 minutes. The floor is yours.
Yeah, I don't have a fancy setup here, so the other lights, when I have them on, they're too bright, and it's hard on people's eyes, so I just use that light. So, I mean, if you guys want to see more, I don't know what to tell you. But it's really not relevant for anything that we're presenting today. All right, so anybody who knows me, I'm not really a philosophy guy. I kind of think philosophy is, well, it's not completely unuseful. It's definitely not something I spend a lot of time focusing on. I'm talking about in a broad sense, ideas here. We're talking about ideas more than the nuts and bolts of philosophy. He doubled down on it. Yeah, ancient man knew more than we do. No, I'm not saying that ancient man, they were dumb, that they didn't know anything. They did know some stuff, and they were still human, so they had the ability to learn and do things. But I mean, comparing what they were able to do at the time with what we're able to do today, I mean, I think there's just no real. Yeah, okay, they built a few stone buildings that were really big. Yeah, they did. Why would we want to do that today? Could we do it today? I'm sure we could, but why would we want to? But we do build amazing structures today that actually have use. Why would we want to build a pyramid today? We wouldn't. Are we getting dumber today? Well, you know, the idiocracy argument, maybe we are. But yeah, that's not to say that we began as these people with living to be 900 with IQs of 600. That there's no evidence for that. And yeah, I'd love to see evidence of that. Not that they did a few things that we may not have thought they'd be able to do, but something that's anywhere on par with today. You know, I gave the example with Ken Hovind about us going to the moon. That's like our big achievement. Yet these people who you supposedly say live to be 500 with IQs of 600 were playing around with stone tools, because we have the evidence of the stone tools that they were making at the time. Pre-human ancestors, Homo erectus, Homo ergaster. We know the tools that they made. These were not humans that lived to be 900 with IQs of 500. Male versus female biology. Well, you know, I mean, that's funny that you went that route. What is a woman? A woman can be a biological woman or a trans woman. Why does it affect you how people want to identify their gender? You know, nobody's forcing you to be with anyone you don't want to be with. Nobody's forcing you to express your gender in a way that you don't want to express your gender. Just leave them alone. Why do we have to? Why all this hate for people just trying to live their best life and trying to be as comfortable in their own skin as possible? And you know, looking back, look back 20 years ago. How many Christian churches were performing gay marriages? Virtually none. How many are performing them today? A lot. So the needle is moving, and it's not moving in your direction. If past is prologue, 20 years from now, most Christian churches, or a large percentage of them, will be totally fine with gay and transgender people as the needle is moving now. They're reading what it says in the Bible, and they're disregarding it in favor of humanity. And that's a form of evolution, believe it or not, because the religion is evolving to keep itself relevant. Because people will not go to churches that are espousing things they find morally horrible. And we saw that in the past with churches supporting slavery. Well, they couldn't do that anymore because people have moved on from that. It's not morally viable anymore. Biblical truth is foundation. No, we don't have any absolute foundation for truth that's true. All knowledge is provisional. All knowledge is based on assumptions. What we do is we constantly go out and we incorporate new information, new data into our model, into the worldview. And when something doesn't fit, we throw it out. We don't begin with something that we defend at all costs, that we think is absolute truth. You can't question it. And if reality doesn't seem to fit, we just make it fit because we have to. That's not how we do things. We look at reality. We bend our beliefs to reality, not reality to our beliefs. Christianity is not going anywhere. Well, I mean, the data seems to suggest otherwise. Every week the church pews seem a little emptier than they were the week before. It's because religion just doesn't have anything to offer people anymore. The invisible product, selling people delusions of grandeur. People just aren't buying it anymore. It had its heyday, but it's going out. And 100 years from now, will it be gone? Probably not. Would we want to suppress it by force? Absolutely not. That's not what we're advocating for. We believe in putting the information out, and religion is dying. And we're just going to allow it to die. And that's a good thing. And he threw some No True Scotsman things about Catholicism, Christianity. Well, before the Reformation, there was no what you would consider Christian. It was basically the Catholic Church was the only game in town. And the things that you as Protestants today believe, almost nobody believed. Almost nobody believed those things that you would say is true Christianity today. Go back far enough, your ancestors were Catholic. They were going to Mass. They were being Catholics because that's just the history of Christianity. And, the Protestants were doing bad things too. The Protestants burned people at the stake too. Maybe not as prolifically as the Catholics, but it's not as if it was only the Catholics doing these bad things and the Protestants were just these lovable, fuzzy, cuddly teddy bears who would never hurt anybody, because that's not really reality, history that we see. And we do know the age of the Earth, and we figured that out long before. We knew that it was older than 6,000 years, long before radiometric dating, long before the theory of evolution was even proposed. We didn't say, oh, well, we need a long time for this evolution, so I guess we're just going to have an old Earth. Now, we already knew. We didn't know how old it was, but we knew it was older than 6,000 years before that. He talks about wasting money on evolution and science. Well, I mean, talk about wasting money on religion. How much money is spent on religion that to glorify and deify somebody that you can't even demonstrate any evidence that he actually exists? I mean, you think that's a waste of money. We don't use, of course, carbon dating to date the Earth. We use, there's other isotopic dating methods that we use: rubidium, strontium, potassium, argon. And of course, everything you're saying about radiometric dating, the equilibrium, all that's been thoroughly rebutted. And you mentioned in your part 2 video, which I have to tell you, we really enjoyed taking a look at that last night, that you were going to come out with a radiometric dating episode. And I can't wait to see that one, because if it's similar with episode 1 and 2, there's going to be a lot of great content for us there, because then we can go through piece by piece and show why what you're saying about radiometric dating is not true. And it is good science. The people who know the science, they know that it's true. If you can't understand it, if you just don't get it, if you don't understand the methodology of it, well, I mean, that's on you. But yeah, we can't wait to see that one. Flaws of Reconstruction. It was certainly very interesting, but we can talk about that more in the open discussion.
Okay, James, thank you for that 8-minute uninterrupted rebuttal. Jamie, we are now going to hand it over to you, and you've got 8 minutes as well. Whenever you're ready, the floor is yours. Go ahead. Oh, Jamie, let's restart that. You are on mute. I just unmuted you. You're good to go. Starting now.
Yeah, you're slacking on the mute button today, Donnie. All right, so it seems like he didn't really bring any evidence again. He just kind of made some assertions, didn't show any kind of documentation to back up those assertions, which is kind of just like everything you'll find in evolution. And then, you know, he wanted to bring a couple points up. Like he said, why does gender affect me? They just want to be left alone. Can't they live their best life? For the first question, why does gender affect me? It doesn't affect me. It affects society. This is a social contagion. Okay, it's like a cancer. If you just let it grow, it will infest everything. Then he said they just want to be left alone. That's not true at all, because that's what they said 20 years ago, and we left them alone. And now they're infiltrating our schools, our churches. They're infiltrating libraries, everything. They don't want to be left alone. They want to convert us, just like we want to convert you to Christianity. They want to convert us to their ideology. Then he said, can't they just live their best life? Yes, they can live their best life, but that's not their best life. Their best life is what God designed them for. And that's what I'm trying to get them to see, is that their best life is waiting for them. They just have to accept God and then, you know, follow this path that he puts them on. I guarantee you, I cannot say that I am perfect. Okay. Before I was a Christian, I would be what you would call a heathen. Okay. I was tied into the occult. I was tied into witchcraft and sorcery, and I was into, you know, all the things you would expect of someone that that it runs in these circles. What brought me out of it was actually the revelation of the power behind the occult. There is a very strong power behind the occult. And if Satan is real, then that means God is real. So you can't tell me that there's no evidence for him, because I can prove him. The fact that we have life proves God. Okay, you want observable evidence for God? Life is the observable evidence. If you can make life without God, then go ahead and do it and prove to me that we don't need God for life. Because the Bible says that the only reason we have life is because the breath of life was put into us from God. So again, with all your scientists out there that are getting paid millions of dollars to prove your ideology, I would like them to create life in the lab from nothing. Don't grab dust from outside. Don't go and grab all these chemicals and, you know, fuse them together to make one little micromolecule. No, I want them to make life from scratch. And then maybe we can discuss that there is no evidence for God, because the fact that we are alive and there is no explanation for that, that alone to me proves God. Another thing he said was, what came first, Catholicism or Christianity? I've heard this argument millions of times. If you read the Bible, which you claim that you read the Bible, but like the Bible says, those that are not growing spiritually will not understand spiritual things. So although you read the Bible, you're not understanding the Bible. Okay. The Bible clearly shows that there was a church before Catholicism existed. Catholicism came onto the scene and they used force to take over Christianity. But again, I wasn't aware that we were going to be debating philosophy and religion. I thought we were going to be talking about science. So as soon as you're ready to bring up scientific topics and bring citations, articles, references, some kind of substance, then we can really get into this debate, because I guarantee you, I have 4 different PowerPoints up that have plenty of papers that reference universities that you would agree are accredited universities. I have the Chlamydomonas paper with all of my highlighted notes on it ready to go. I have all of these references that I'm prepared to use. You have not once brought up a reference. All you're doing is making dogmatic statements, and that dogma is evolution. So again, I want to see some real scientific evidence. If you can prove evolution to me, I will gladly admit it to everyone on a live broadcast. But until you bring evidence for that, your dogmatic statements mean nothing. I'm not really going to use the full 8 minutes here, because I kind of want to see how the open discussion goes. So let's just go ahead and wrap it up, Donnie.
All right, Jamie and James, appreciate the opening statements and the rebuttals. We've got several minutes that I will throw into the discussion to make sure that we're being thorough. The minutes not used, that is for rebuttals and opening statements. The topic for tonight, creation versus evolution. And so I want to make sure in the open discussion time, we are utilizing the time appropriately and basically going back and forth and bringing up points relevant to each other's positions. And so, James, you defending the evolution side today. Let's start with you, since Jamie did end with his rebuttal, and we will allow you to pick the first point or first topic that you'd like to discuss. Go ahead.
Well, yeah, Jamie. So, like, I think we both understand the claims. I think we both understand the position of where we're talking from. So, for me to just come on and say, oh, let's talk about ERVs, or let's talk about this, let's talk about that. I wanted to, it's kind of like your overall mindset, how you approach the topic and why you don't find these ideas to be credible, why you have such a problem with the way science works and what science has told us. But so we took a look at last night your problems with reconstruction and your gripes with the fossil record, and you don't like how the fossils are put together, even though like we were watching it, we didn't really see any type of real problem with the methodology or what they're doing to present these fossils. They're certainly not committing fraud. They're telling you openly what they're doing, how they're putting these fossils together, why they're doing what they're doing. But why do you think this is not evidence for evolution, the fossil record? I would just ask.
So if you actually watch the video like you said you did, there's a little video in there from the Harry Gold show that shows a great demonstration of this. You can take a skull and basically make anything out of that skull. I mean, the skull itself does not actually show you what you're looking at. The body itself does not actually show you what you're looking at. And actually, I'd like to pull up these quotes right here, and we can kind of go over these. No, let me fast forward through this 1 second, because I have that presentation ready to go. I know that you like to talk about fossils a lot, so I figured that you would be, I figured you would be bringing that up here. All right, so I'm almost there.
Made a testable prediction. You're starting off on the right foot.
Okay, so this is David Pilbeam, anthropologist from Harvard. He says, at least in paleoanthropology, data is still so sparse that the evolution theory heavily influences interpretations. So they're not taking the data and using it to confirm evolution. They're taking evolution and using that to form the data or to form the conclusions of the data. So again, this is what's called circular reasoning, right? They want to prove this. They're using evidence that does not show that, but they're twisting it to look like that. Here's another one from Ernest Houghton. I don't really like to side with him too much because he was a promoter of eugenics. But he says, to attempt to restore the soft parts of the skull is an even more hazardous undertaking. The lips, eyes, ears, and nasal tip leave no clues on the underlying bony parts. You can, with equal facility, model a Neanderthal skull, the features of a chimpanzee, or the lineage of a human philosopher. Remember, this guy was from Harvard University, and he openly said, I think this was in one of his thesis statements that he did for his doctorate. He made this. This was what he quoted. He directly said that you can take a skull and make either a monkey or a human out of it. You can take a skull and create both, or a middle, or a transitional, as they would call it. Also, you can look at the Neanderthal man. They made an entire man and his wife off of one tooth. Now, I know you're going to disregard that one because it was proven wrong. But for a long time, these were not proven wrong. These were used for evolution, and it basically supported the theory long enough for them to find something else to throw into the mix. And then once it got discredited, they were like, okay, that's fine. We have something else we can focus on now. So see, this is all constantly one giant job of deceiving people long enough to find the next thing you can deceive them with once that one comes to light. Over and over again, we see that evolution is proven wrong. Over and over again, we see that the interpretations they made were frauds. Over and over again, we see that evolution is not true. And yet every single time that you're proven wrong, you just jump to another piece of information. So it's kind of like when you're in an abusive
And
relationship.
I just want to jump in, Jamie. I appreciate. I don't want to interrupt you. I do want to try and keep it as free flowing as possible as well.
Yeah.
So,
Go
Jamie,
ahead.
maybe take 10 seconds, finish your thoughts, and then we'll hand it over to James.
Yeah. So what I was gonna say is, evolution, all the evidence is just constantly being proven wrong. And it's kind of like you're in an abusive relationship with a theory of no God. You're constantly proven wrong. It's like the abusive relationship. You're constantly getting beaten by this lie, but yet you keep going back to it because you don't want to admit there's a God.
Yeah. Well, there's a lot of people who accept evolution and accept God. There's not a dichotomy there. You could be a Christian, you could be a theist and not be a young earth creationist. But, like so many of the people on the younger side, you take like these articles and things from the very earliest days of evolutionary theory, from the infancy of evolution. And we've learned so much more since then. And, scientific fraud, scientific mistakes, they happen. Yeah, they happen. But we uncover them, and science uncovers them. And this idea that we can't know anything about the past based on the fossils, like when we have a fossil, and we have an artist do a rendition of it, can we be 100% sure that that's exactly how the animal looked? No. There is some artistic license. There is some interpretation there. There is some uncertainty there. There's assumptions built in. But what we do is we don't just take one fossil, one example, and make an animal based on that, and that's it. We never update it. No. We might find 40% of one here. We might find 30% here, 20% here. And we put our knowledge together, and we constantly tweak our model, and we get better and better and closer. But like I said before, all knowledge is provisional. All our knowledge is based on assumptions. It's subject to review. It's subject to further information being incorporated. And that's how we deal with fossils. It's not as if we only have these fossils from the 1800s, early 1900s. It's not as if we only have Lucy for the Australopithecines. We have dozens of other examples that are even more complete than Lucy. And we don't have to pin our hopes on just these one early finds. And you seemed in your video to take great exception to Dr. Johansen being able to identify the first bone as a hominid bone. These people spend decades doing research and studying these fossils, and yeah, you or I might not be able to look at that bone and tell immediately that's a hominid. If we spent decades doing research on it, that's what you can do when you actually have the knowledge and experience that unfortunately we just don't have. We're just amateurs trying to critique the work that they're doing, and I think we have to remember that.
Okay, so first thing, I see a lot of people in the chat are saying I quoted an evolutionist. Yes, I quote an evolutionist because if you don't hear it from an evolutionist, then you just automatically reject it as false. So I'm showing you from evolutionary sources that they will even admit that these reconstructions are based more on the evolutionary interpretation than they are on the actual data. The second point is he was talking about how Donald Johansen found one little fragment of a thumb bone or something like that, and he created an entire animal that we've never seen before based on that one little thumb bone. I would encourage people to go watch my Flaws of Reconstruction video, because in that video, the bone was a fragment of an actual thumb bone. It wasn't even a full bone of the thumb.
He didn't create a model based on the one bone.
Here's the thing. Okay, what is a hominid? Give me the definition of a hominid, James.
An ape-like ancestor, human, the group that
a hominid is an upright walking creature. Okay, a hominid is an upright walking human. Okay, but here's the thing: how do you know that it walked upright from a thumb bone? Please answer that question.
Yeah, if it's consistent with the other hominid thumb bones that we've seen, then you can identify that hominid.
That's the thing. You're basing that on assumptions. First, you assume that these other fossils are upright walking. Yeah, so the little bit of a thumb bone that you found.
The Australopithecines were upright walkers. Nobody really questions that. The shape of their hips indicates that they walked upright. Bipedalism was already established with the Australopithecines. No? No?
No, it wasn't. No, because the thing is, here's the thing. They're basing all of this on fragments of bones. They don't even have full bone. They're based on fragments of bone. And they're saying because of a few little fragments that don't even have to do with its upright standing position, they're basing all of their assumptions on those little bitty fragments. That's not enough to be considered science. Now, the other point I wanted to make was here's a skull of a real live animal. Right. Here's the skull of a real live animal. If you were to give this to a reconstruction artist that had never seen this skull before, what are they going to come up with? They're going to come up with some kind of crazy alien creature. You know what that skull comes from? It comes from a hippo. That's how unreliable reconstruction is. Yeah, I know. Actually, and I'm showing the audience so they can see how ridiculous reconstruction is.
Aside from the gum flaps covering those teeth, that drawing is not crazy. It's not like it's drawing something that's, those teeth, those are all covered with gums. But this is the thing. This is what we're doing. We're not handing these people, sending these artists bones with no guidance and here's a bone, just do whatever you want with it. Make something up with it. No, they're given guidance. Even in your video, you said they're given guidance from the paleontologist to how to bring this creature to life. And nobody's saying it's as accurate as a photograph, or nobody's saying that it's even hard science. It's basically, these are just to give the public an idea so that you and I and people who aren't experts, we can get an idea of how these animals would have looked. Okay. And if we find more data that says something else, we'll modify it. I don't understand what the problem is with this.
The problem is that this is all imagination. Okay. You just said it. They create these so that they can put an idea in people's heads. And now that idea has hijacked science and is now what I would call is delaying the progress of science. We're so focused on the creation versus evolution debate that none of us are actually studying the real things like virology. We're not focusing as much time as we could in virology. We're not focusing as much time as we could in biology. All of this time we're wasting on creation and evolution could be put on so many more useful things. But instead, I'm over here arguing with you about the reconstruction of a hippo because you don't want to take your ideology out of science.
Like I said, this is the discussion we're having here is not what the real scientists are doing. We're amateurs, okay? We're just two people having a conversation. The scientists in the labs, those people who know what they're talking about, are not discussing this. They left this conversation behind decades ago. And it's funny, you mentioned virology and things like that because they apply evolutionary principles in virology, immunology, how the immune system works. It's why do you think
can I talk to that point?
Have to constantly
why do you think to that point right there?
Constantly update our vaccines? Go ahead.
So you said they're applying evolutionary thinking to virology. That's actually not true. If you go and look at the the data that the FBI and the National Institute of Health, both of them are using the mutation rates given by creationist calculations to do their research. So a great example, it's actually in one of Donny and Matt's videos. Donny and Matt have a video called Defending Genesis or something like that. It's like 4 hours long. But in there, they have the citations from the National Institute of Health and from the FBI. The best example I liked was the ones with forensics. So the mutational rate for forensics is being based off of the creationist mutation rates, not the evolutionary mutation rates, because they're finding that those are more accurate. Now, you may be asking yourself, how did they find that those are more accurate? The way they found those were more accurate was because they had situations where someone was murdered and there was blood left on the scene of the crime. And when they went to the son for the scene of the crime, when they went to the son of the person, when they went to the person that they found the blood of, he claimed that his father killed the person instead. So they went and tested the father's blood, and they found that it's the same DNA, obviously, because he comes from his father, but they were able to calculate the mutations based on the creationist calculations to prove that it was not the father because the son has mutations that the father doesn't. So yes, the calculations from creationist scientists are the ones being used in real life scenarios. Same thing with virology. Virology does the same thing with vaccines. They're using mutational rates based on creationist sources, not on sources. And one more point on the exact topic. I have the quote here somewhere. I don't know which presentation it's in, but I have a quote from someone that does all of this work, and they specifically say in their quotations that evolution has no impression on real scientific on real scientific data. While you're talking, I'll try and find that quote because it's basically proving that evolution has no benefit to science. So go ahead and respond to that.
So say some people, but I think a lot of people would disagree with that. The fact that you can find one person who says something, I mean, congratulations. We can find a lot of people that believe the world is flat. But yeah, you don't get to say, like, to give creationists the credit for mutation. Mutation happens. We can't disagree with that. It's obvious. Mutation happens, and it's an evolutionary process in every single way. Okay, we admit that mutation now. You can pick up traits and that genetics.
The credit for mutation. What create.
Jamie, I would say for maybe the last 4 seconds, you cut out on us.
Oh, that's him cutting out? Okay.
You're still cut. James, you're good. Jamie, you were the one cutting out that time.
Okay.
And so if you could reiterate. No worries. Zach Hancock's. It's Battle of the Robots. But I think we're good now.
Because I had like 4 PowerPoints open.
That'll do it.
Yeah, I'm closing out all my extra windows. I don't think we're going to go through too many PowerPoints. So let me just close all this out.
You're coming in good now. So if you wanted to maybe reiterate your point there, and then we'll let James respond.
Really quick, because I was trying to respond.
I was just making the point that the mutation rates that they find most accurate are the creation mutation rates. I'm not saying that mutations belong to creationists. All I'm saying is that our calculations are the ones they're using and finding to be more accurate, especially when it comes to vaccines.
I would have to take a look at that video. I find that to be a little suspect because, well, what else have creationists
because it doesn't fit your model,
right? No, because what else have you guys ever gotten right? I mean, look at the history of like life on Earth. If creationism were true, we'd find all life mixed in with each other. I mean, like before, you mentioned that, we've never found whales with leg bones. Well, actually, we have whale ancestors that have legs. And when we look at those
ancestors are the assumptions that were built into fragments of fossils. Well, again, this goes back to Reconstruction.
When we look at whales and then we look at what's before them, we don't find whales. We find those guys. We found pre-whales. We find animals that could have walked on land. We didn't just come up with say, I guess we're going to take whales and then we'll go back and hey guys, let's have them walking on land. Wouldn't that be cool? No, we found the evidence and we found there's no more ocean-bound whales, but instead we have these mammals that have legs that were kind of aquatic or semi-aquatic. That's how the scientific process works. And talk about mutations. You guys with your creationism, because you have to accept microevolution because it's undeniable. You have to accept it, but you can't extrapolate that out. You have to say that there's these arbitrary limits to where mutations can go. And I would just say that if you take a story, and like take the genetic code on a book and write it all out. If you keep changing the letters, you keep changing the words to the story is going to keep changing. At no point will you change words and letters in a story, yet the story stay the same. There's no mechanism to do that. If you keep changing, the organism will keep changing very slowly, but it will continue to change. And mutation happens. It happens over the long term, and these changes do add up.
So you said that we have to accept microevolution. I don't have to accept anything. I don't think that we have to accept microevolution. In fact, I was talking to someone the other night that rejects microevolution, and the argument that he made. Well, yeah. So the argument that he made, I'm not fully convinced by this, but he does make a good argument. As far as we can tell, every example of microevolution has been with the help of intelligent input. So we alter these animals. They don't do it on their own.
He doesn't think dogs and wolves are related. He doesn't even accept that, which we actually have demonstrable. We know that that happened because people did it. But the idea is if something can happen in nature, or if we can do something in the laboratory, it can happen in nature, albeit much slower and unguided. Like that's why evolution, it's an unguided process. It doesn't have a goal.
And so look, I'm not saying that I reject microevolution. I'm just saying we don't have to accept microevolution. Now, we accept microevolution because there is evidence for it. Yeah, so majority of us will accept microevolution because there is evidence for it. But again, every example that we have of microevolution, it seems to be from intelligent input, artificially selecting. Okay, so
because in nature, it takes, even microevolution takes so long that we can't directly observe it. Okay, but just like if we can't directly observe a crime scene, we can take the data available to us and we can try to figure out what happened. It's not going to be, in some cases, it's equally as good or better than an eyewitness, because people can lie, people can misremember, but the forensic evidence doesn't lie. It just is what it is. It doesn't have a goal. It's just reality.
Yeah, and then we go back to the fact that forensic evidence uses creationist mutation rates for their forensics. So
again, I would have to look at that. I find that claim to be very doubtful, but I'm not. Either way, it's not. Even if the creationist mutation rates tended to be a little better, maybe in the short term, it's really no threat to evolution on the long term. Because even the people you're getting that data from, even the people you get that from, like these bottlenecks that they find happening 80, 120,000 years ago, which you guys would reject, but you'll take what you can from them, but reject the rest of them. It's really when you guys go through these papers and try to quote mine and pull out little nuggets of things that you think agree with you, even though, well, like you said before, you're quoting people who accept evolution, and they're telling you like how they're doing something, and you're saying that undermines evolution, yet they don't reject evolution. They're trying to help you understand it, and you're trying to twist what they're saying. It's
so this whole argument on quote mining, that's absolutely ridiculous. Okay, if you want, I could pull up the Chlamydomonas paper and we can read it sentence by sentence so that you can see I'm not quote mining any of my arguments from that. Whenever I take a quote, I don't have to quote the entire paper in order to quote what they're saying. Okay, you don't take any quotes. Okay, you have yet to bring one quote to the table, one reference to the table. So the fact that I'm bringing a quote is better than no quotes at all.
But now, actually, no. I think if you're taking somebody's work and someone who is an evolutionist, and you're trying to take something, there's one or two sentences they're saying that, and you're saying that, look, they're discrediting evolution. But is that really intellectually honest?
No, I'm not saying. I never said they were discrediting evolution. What I was saying is they admit to the same arguments that I'm making. The argument I made is that reconstructions are not reliable because they're based on evolutionary interpretations. So therefore, I have to find evidence that this is true. And when I look at the quotes from Harvard University professors, that's exactly what they say. So therefore, I'm using that to support my argument. I'm not saying that they themselves are completely dismantling evolution. What I'm saying, though, is that they will admit to the same claim that I am making, because if I make the claim, you reject it. But if they make the claim, now you have to figure out a way to fit that into your position. And the only way you can fit that into your position is by claiming that it's quote mining. And again, we can go paper by paper and read every word if you want.
No, we went through the video, and actually most of those quotes, first of all, they don't really undermine evolution, what you're trying to say. And just pointing out that there's assumptions going into this, that there's a framework, we all have to make certain assumptions to get along in this world. We can't prove that we exist, yet we have to just make certain assumptions to be able to function. What you would have to do is show that the underlying reason they're making those assumptions are wrong. You haven't been able to do that. To a certain extent, we are assuming evolution because it's been verified. It's been confirmed. As I said,
that's not how assumptions work.
Fossil record, your view of the fossil record, we should find all sorts of animals all mixed up because they were all alive at the same time. And that's certainly not what we find. We just
Yeah,
don't
we have
find
plenty
it.
of answers for that too. There's many variables that
They're
go
not
into
good
the
answers, though. They're very bad answers, and only
No, they're
people
not. They
who
are
would
good
accept
answers
it
if you
are.
actually listen to them and analyze them. What
Oh,
you
I
do
have.
though
They're
is you
just
listen to like
woefully,
half of the sentence and then you just disregard it. So no, there are good answers out there. You're just not willing to consider them. That's the difference.
Gentlemen, let me jump in here real quick. I like the free-flowing nature of the discussion so far. It looks like we've talked about the fossil record and a few things related to the fossil record for a while. Correct me if I'm wrong. James W. started the discussion, brought up the fossil record. And so, Jamie, why don't we now hand it to you? Pick a line of evidence that you believe would support your position of creation, and then we'll engage that for a little bit.
All right, so I guess this was the next one I wanted to talk about was mutations and speciation. Based on the current speciation rate that we can observe, which is what science is, it's observing, studying, testing, demonstrating, and coming to a conclusion. Based on what we can observe with speciation rates, according to a 6 million year Earth or whatever number you want to come up with now, we should have a lot more species than we have today, but we don't. What we calculate is that the number of species we have lines up with the creationist timeline. And then that also goes along with mutations. Same thing with mutations. Evolution believes that as we mutate, we get better. Creation believes that as we mutate, we get worse. So what do we see with mutations? Majority of mutations are... I'm sorry. Yeah, okay.
It's not about getting better. It's not about getting better. Okay, the mutations happen. The environment selects. It generally makes an animal more fit for its environment over time. Populations evolve, not individuals. You're trying to apply evolution to an individual, but that's really not how it works. Population
so it's funny.
Genetics.
It's funny that atheists make this point. They always make this point. We're not saying things get better, right? That's what you always say.
No, we're not.
But what do you show? On your chart, what do you show? You show this little bitty amoeba turning into something that we would consider better, more functional, whatever the argument may be.
That's our bias, though. Life doesn't care.
I'm glad you admitted it. It's a bias. Thank you. It's a
our bias
as
humans. The fact that we like being conscious creatures, we like being able to interact with the world. Life doesn't care about that. Okay, it's not like these what you would call lower forms of life are trying to be us, or life is just existing on Earth, and we're not more evolved than an earthworm. Okay, we're all equally evolved. We all began from a common ancestor. It's not that things get better. It's just they're getting more fit for their environment. That's the much better way to say it.
And what does more fit for the environment mean? More fit for the environment equals better. Okay.
Better
so again, you say we're not getting
better,
better, but then you make the claim that we're getting better.
Because
also, let me go ahead and put this on there. Hold on.
In a different way.
Hold on. I'm not done with that point. So you said that we're becoming more fit for the environment, right? So according to your chart, amoebas are down here, humans are up here, and we're getting more fit for our environment, right? Well, then why is it that amoebas are much more resilient and can survive much harsher conditions than humans? It's because we're devolving. Okay. Based on your chart, we are getting worse, and you are making the claim that we're getting better. We don't need to
survive those conditions. We don't need to be able to survive those conditions. We do just fine the way we are. We're not trying to do something we don't need to do. We do just fine. We don't need to be able to survive in those type of conditions that they survive in. So we don't, because it's not evolutionarily advantageous.
Well, that's not exactly accurate. So here's a great example to prove that. Okay. Humans, we had to create cars to travel, right? We had to actually invent a car so that we can get from point A to point B faster. Whereas if you look at your chart, at some point in the past, we had wings. So why did we lose wings just so we can create a car, right?
I don't know that we had wings. Perhaps an ancestor did at some point. I'd have to look on that. No, we didn't. We don't need wings. It's not like evolution says, "Oh, wouldn't that be cool to be able to have wings and fly around?" That's not how this works. Like Ken Hovind's always like, "Why didn't the rabbit just evolve wings to fly away?" That's not how evolution works. Evolution can solve a problem in numerous different ways. It doesn't need to, just because we think it would be cool to have wings, that's not, it's just not in the cards. It's not the evolutionary path that we're on.
So here's what you said. You said evolution can evolve things in different ways. And what I don't think you're noticing, right? Okay, that's exactly what I wanted to hear. Evolution can solve problems in different ways. So if it's solving a problem, that means that that's your intelligent designer. Your intelligent designer is evolution. So therefore, your God is evolution, just like my God is the creator of the universe.
It's an unguided process, though. That's reproduction with variation. It's not a guided process. If an organism can evolve to solve problems, guess what? It'll go extinct. What's the history of life on Earth? We have 99% of the animal species that ever existed are extinct. They didn't make it. Okay, what we have today is just a fraction of what has ever lived. Yeah, the history of life on Earth is death. Most things die. Most things go out of existence. And well, you know, it's real funny that you mentioned this, because talking to young Earth creationists on this, I love to bring up this point. You see, the point is actually you guys accept evolution on a much more rapid scale than we do. Okay, because you need to rely on evolution. You need to rely on an extremely fast form of evolution to make your Noah's Ark story work. To make that work, you have to have animals. You have to have Donnie's mutated all the forms of big cats we have today into one pair of big cats that got off the ark, and then they have to evolve, speciate rapidly within a few generations to all the animals that we have that we see today. But after they did that, so a few generations of rapid fire evolution, and then it just stops. It goes back. Because we have examples today. We know what animals in the ancient world look like because the people did depictions of them. In the ancient world, a lion was a lion, a tiger was a tiger, a leopard was a leopard, jaguars were jaguars. We have depictions of them. They were basically in their modern form. But yet you guys are saying they all came from two basic cats that got off of Noah's Ark, and they all evolved rapidly and then just stopped. Because you can't have all these animals on the ark to make your story work. So you guys already accept evolution, but on a much more rapid scale than we would ever suggest.
So variation is not evolution, because evolution is when you go from one kind of animal to a different kind. That's the macro stage. You can't get past that hurdle. You can't show me one single frog that turned into a dog. Okay, you can't show me single amoeba that turned into a tree. But you make these claims. You can't observe it, you can't prove it, but you claim it and pretend that it's science. Okay, now as far as mutations go, again, mutations cause less information. They cause more diseases, less durability in the environment. So whereas your model shows more reliable, more stronger, more fit as we progress, the actual observable data shows the opposite. It shows us digressing. The other point that you said was about Noah's Ark. You said that we accept evolution because Noah's Ark. No, we accept variation. And variation means that, yes, there is variety within the gene pool, but it will never jump outside of that gene pool. So whereas the lions are swimming inside of the lion pool, the lion will never jump out of the lion's pool and jump into the giraffe's pool. Okay, there's limits inside of those gene pools. That's what you're not understanding. And then you said that we believe in a much faster evolution, right? Because the variations from Noah's Ark to today, right? But what's funny about that is I already mentioned this earlier. When you look at mutation rates and when you look at the variations of animals based on mutation rates and based on what we observe for variation, the variation that we observe today lines up with the Noah's Ark timeline. The variation for evolution does not line up to what we observe. If the variation we see today was millions of years going back into the past, we should have way more animals than we have today. So I don't think you can answer that. How do you answer that? Where are all of the animals?
They went extinct. The Earth only has a carrying capacity for so many. And this is one thing that creationism really gets off, because you've got the entire fossil record of animals. You think they were, even though probably 99.99% of animals do not fossilize. So all the animals that we have, if that's less than 1% of the animals that were alive, I mean, when Noah's flood happened, were the animals stacked on top of each other? I mean, the Earth can only care for so many animals at once. We can't have an unlimited amount of animals on Earth, like the carrying capacity for humans. Ken Oben used to say, oh, you could put all the humans in Jacksonville, Florida. Yeah, but where would you grow their food? And just because you could fit them in there does not mean you could care for that population over time.
So I wasn't expecting you to bring this up, but I'm so glad you did, because I actually did the numbers on this. Based on the landmass we have today that's habitable, that means subtracting the Sahara Desert and subtracting the ice parts of the world that are not
Polar
really
regions.
habitable.
Yeah.
Polar regions. Yeah, I'm sorry. So based on removing those from the landmass equation, the habitable land we have today divided by the population we have today would leave us with roughly every single person on Earth having 3 acres per person. So each person would have plenty of space to grow their food. Now you said, how does that explain the pre-flood world? Because the pre-flood world, there were so many animals. How would they fit? You've heard the argument before. I know you have, because you've debated Kent multiple times. Before the flood, there was more land because the water was under the crust. It wasn't above the crust. There wasn't oceans. There was lakes. There was not oceans. And I know you want to disregard this, but I encourage you to go look at the SciTech article or Science Today article. I'll actually send you the link in the chat because I have it in my email right now. But there's an article where they openly admit that they have found oceans under the crust of the Earth, and they predicted that these oceans would be all over the world. So whereas you say that, oh, that's an insane theory, guess what? They found the oceans under the Earth. So that actually supports
there's
creation.
Water under the crust. Yeah, sure. Okay, whatever. That's nothing to do with God knowing he was going to genocide the planet, so preloading the Earth with these water chambers so that he could drown and kill everybody.
That's not why the water was there. Okay, see that's you putting your assumptions on that. The reason the water was there because that was no. The reason the water was under the crust of the Earth was because that was part of God's original creation. And if you actually read the Bible like you claim you did, in chapter 2 of Genesis, it specifically says that a mist came up from the ground and watered all the earth, so that no one had to actually work. No one had to actually go and build and irrigate their crops, because God took care of that for them. Now, after the flood, the water is on top of the earth, and that doesn't work anymore. So yeah, it's not observable today, but the fact that we find oceans under the water, that was a prediction that creationists made, and now it's a confirmed prediction. So when you say creationists never come up with predictions, creationists never prove anything scientifically, guess what? We predicted there would be oceans under the crust of the earth. Guess what we found? We found oceans under the crust of the earth.
So the Bible is so big, and it makes so many statements. So once in a while, we make a discovery in science, and they look through the Bible. Oh, is there something we can do that kind of points to this? I mean, eventually, a broken clock is right twice a day. Oh, God stretched out the heavens, therefore that explains the Hubble issue with the expanding universe. Well, I mean, it says he stretched out the heavens, not that he's continuing to do it. I mean, yeah. The Bible uses poetic, flowery language, and occasionally you can kind of twist something and make it seem kind of consistent. But there's a lot of stuff in the Bible says that is blatantly contradictory with what we see in the natural world. Just the fact that some of it occasionally maybe turns out to be not demonstrably false is, I don't think it bodes well for the book as a whole.
So I want to point something out to the crowd here. James said he wanted predictions, and he wanted predictions to be proven. I gave him predictions that creationists made and showed how they were proven. And now he says,
water under the crust, that's not
just because the Bible may have not gotten it wrong doesn't mean that it got it right. You see this bias? This is not someone who wants to know the truth. This is someone that wants to push their worldview down everyone else's throats. I just wanted everyone in the crowd to see that, because I know I'm not going to convert you. I know I'm not going to convert you.
If you want to talk about genetics, you want to talk about the Bible, why don't you talk about Jacob's goat breeding program from Genesis, about putting up the striped sticks, the sticks in front of the goats where they copulate, producing different patterns. Yeah, it's in your Bible too. That's a prediction. Does that prediction pan out, Jamie? Can you put sticks up in the ground and alter the genetics of the offspring based on where their parents copulate to produce them, based on sticks? That's in your Bible as much as everything else, as much as the Sermon on the Mount. You're bound by faith to believe it. Does it pan out?
So what you're doing is you're trying to take instances from the Bible that are not displaying scientific facts. Okay. Yes, there are miracles in the Bible. Yes, there are things in the Bible that are not scientific because they are a result of God's intervention. What you don't understand is that God doesn't have to follow the rules of nature. God can come here on earth like he did and make water out of wine in less than a minute. He doesn't have to grow the fruit and then squeeze the juice out of the fruit to make it. He can do whatever he wants. He's not limited by the same limitations we are. Now, the fact that God doesn't have to follow those limitations is somehow evidence to you that God doesn't exist. That's not how it works, okay? I want you to show true evidence for evolution, which you have yet to do. And instead, what you're doing is you're trying to attack the miracles of the Bible, the things that are specifically classified and clarified to be miracles. Okay, don't bring miracles into this. All right, bring the science.
The sticks in the ground is not a miracle. That's not a miracle claim. Yeah, I admit we can't use science to test miracle claims. But if you're going to say that there's things in the Bible we don't have evidence for, we can't prove them, you have to take them by faith. But if the Bible gets things wrong, when it makes testable statements wrong and it gets them flat out wrong, why would we have faith at the things we can't test in the Bible? Why would we believe it when we can't test it if when it does say things we can test, it gets it wrong? Why does the Bible side with the wisdom or the thoughts that ancient man would have had about something like genetics? And that's not a miracle claim. That's a claim about genetics. It's a false claim, but yet it's in there. And yeah.
See, again, this is what you're doing. You're cherry picking the things that you know are not demonstrating specific science. And I'm not saying the Bible is a science book, okay? Not everything in the Bible is science. Obviously, when Jesus walked on water, that's not scientific. Obviously, we can prove that by trying to walk on water. But see, what you're trying to do is you're trying to take the things that are miracles or things that were intervened by God. God was a part of that equation for the goats. Okay, there was a reason for that. And if you read the context of the Bible, you would see that reason. Now, again, instead of attacking the miracles of the Bible, how about you bring the science? Where is the evidence for evolution? Because this debate wasn't creation on trial. This debate was creation versus evolution, which you have yet to bring any evidence for. And every time you bring up a talking point, I completely dismantle it, and then you want to turn around and attack the Bible.
In your own mind, you dismantle.
And everyone else that's watching, except for your butt buddy Amy. That's the only person that's agreeing with you right now. So what else you got?
Okay, guys, let's keep it civil, respectful. Okay, so that was topic 2. Basically, James started fossil record. Jamie brought up one major point for creation. Now let's take the final minutes to do one more major point each. So we're going to throw it back to James W. James, your position or model tonight being evolution. And so now pick a line of evidence or a topic that you believe supports your position. Then we'll run with that one for a little bit, and then we'll give Jamie the opportunity to pick one more as well, and then we'll kind of wrap it up. So James, go ahead.
Well, you're putting it back on evolution. That's why I wanted the topic to be creation versus evolution. It's not just, it's not just a one-sided approach like we've done before. But
right. So if you wanted to pick something that was anti-creation, feel free to do so. Okay, you know what? For this one, let's do this. So we went fossil record, and then Jamie brought up speciation, mutations. We got into some biblical evidence. And so, James, why don't you pick an anti-creation argument then, something that's against creation. And then, Jamie, when we throw it back to you, we'll have you pick something that's anti-evolution. So we'll kind of change it up for this round. James, go ahead.
I would just point out, and I would like to talk about the way that we approach things, the way that we're approaching this discussion. Now, Jamie takes the Bible based on faith. I obviously take evolution based on what we see, based on the fossil record, based on what we see in genetics. We have endogenous retroviruses, which provide great evidence for evolution. We have chromosome 2 fusion that we saw, human chromosome 2. And Jamie is really, he wants to hold evolution's feet to the fire. He wants a detailed explanation for how all this stuff happened. He wants to see demonstrable evidence of it. Yet when it comes to his own position, when it comes to creation, he doesn't care. He just reads it in Genesis and just, okay, all right, God said it, therefore I believe it. So I would ask Jamie, how did God create life? How did he do it?
Well, that's easy. He created man from the dirt, and then he breathed life into the nostrils. Now, you mentioned
Tell me about
ERVs.
that process. Tell me about that process a little bit.
Again, that's you trying to take a miracle and add science into the miracle. Miracles are outside of science.
Maybe he did it miraculously, but I mean, what did he just speak and poof, the dirt came alive? I mean, I don't understand.
And the body. Now, on the side of that coin, how do you explain life? Because there's hundreds, maybe even thousands of scientists that focus on abiogenesis, and none of them have an answer. None of them can agree on an answer even. They have different theories, and all of those theories fall flat. So again, the fact that we have life is very strong evidence for a creator, because we can't explain life any other way. Now, you mentioned ERVs. Do you want to talk about ERVs? Because I'm ready to educate you on ERVs if you're ready.
Oh, let's go into ERVs. Let's talk about ERVs.
All right. So for everyone in the crowd that may not understand ERVs, I'm fairly new to the topic, but I understand the simple concept of it. Viruses are a design feature in every organism of the planet Earth. Okay. So there's viruses in a human that do things like enact the developmental process, or whatever other functions they have found. Those are the only ones that I know of. Is the developmental process is triggered by ERV. So the ERVs that are in our body that have functions, those are called fixed ERVs. Okay, those are going to be found in every single human being, because it's fixed. That means it's in every single human being. Now, when you have an exogenous virus that comes into your body and infects your body, if it infects the somatic, if it infects the somatic cells, then it won't pass down to the germline. But if it infects the germline cells, it will pass down to the next generation. So So what James W. and all of his other buddies are doing is they're saying, hey, we have these ERVs that lost their function. Okay, first off, that's de-evolution. That's not evolution. Second off, I think I heard Taylor say this in his debate the other night. They were able to resurrect these viruses and found out they had function. So every fixed ERV that we're finding has a function that specifically benefits our design. However, the fact that we're losing those functions shows de-evolution, not evolution. Now, the thing is, they see that there's some ERVs that we have as humans that monkeys also have, and they say, oh, that's evidence that we evolved from monkeys. No, it's not. And the reason is because usually those ERVs are doing the same functions in the monkey that they are doing in us. So, for example, the ERV that triggers the development of the fetus in the womb, that's going to be used in all mammals. So we will find that ERV in just about every mammal that gives birth with a uterus. And of course, we're going to have more ERVs similar to apes because we are a lot more similar in our design features. Now, of course, the fish is going to have less ERVs similar to us than the monkey will or the ape will, because we have a lot different design features. But they want to take these similar design features that clearly prove a forward-thinking designer, and they want to say that that proves that we evolved from monkeys. No, you're adding that interpretation on there, and you can have that interpretation because you're free to whatever religion you want. But that is not solid proof for evolution, because it can also be proof for creation.
Well, I mean, and that's the thing. You guys can just look at the work science does. And you could just ticky-tack God on at the end and say, oh, well, God just did it that way. We don't have any evidence for it. Can't even prove he exists. But he just did it that way because that's the way he just did it. But doesn't it seem kind of deceptive of your God? Like, for instance, your God could design things any way he wanted to do. Why would he have to use virus cells to put these features into people and make a reasonable interpretation of that look like that we have a common ancestor with these other animals that share these endogenous retroviruses in the same location, meaning it's almost certain that we inherited these down from a common ancestor. And you even admit that that's a reasonable interpretation of it. Why is God deceptively doing that? He could have made these whatever function some of these have. He could have done that a different way. He didn't have to rely on these endogenous.
Okay, so can I answer that question for you?
Viral DNA to do it. Yeah, go ahead.
So I hear this every time someone brings up ERVs. Why did God design it to look like evolution? Well, first off, he didn't design it to look like evolution. The only reason we have harmful viruses today is because of degeneration of the genes. So what happens is, let's say that a bat, mutates over the generations, and that deteriorates their DNA. Now those viruses are looking for a new host. They actually hop off and infect someone else through the processes of exogenous viruses. So now what we think viruses bad, right? That's like the mentality that we have, because the only viruses that we knew up until, a couple decades ago was bad viruses. But that's only a result of a corrupted DNA line. Before the degeneration of the creation because of the flood and the destruction and all that, before that, all viruses were good. All viruses had functions in the animals that they were in. So yeah, and then also I heard someone else say that it's the location that matters.
They're parasitic. A virus infects a host cell and turns it into a virus factory. How is that ever beneficial? How is that good in and of itself?
Okay, let me answer that question for you. So the viruses are only non-beneficial to organisms that it was not originally designed for. So when we get a virus that comes from, let's say, a bat, right? That virus is going to interact with our DNA and cause a problem. However, that virus inside the bat has a very important function for the bat. So the fact that the ERVs in the bat are bad for us doesn't mean it's bad for everything. It's only bad for us because our DNA was not designed to handle that virus.
But humans we are clumps of cells, basically. And at the cellular level, what a virus is doing, it's infecting a cell and basically turning that cell into a viral factory. How is that good for a cell to kill a cell and have it make more viruses? The fact that it's inserted in the genome and its genetic code over millions of years has found some type of function, which, by the way, if it didn't, it would have evolved itself out of the genome. That's fine. Evolution can handle that. It's no threat to evolution whatsoever.
So I literally just gave you the answer to this question, okay? Just because a virus is bad in us doesn't mean the virus is bad in its original designed host. So the thing you have to understand,
those cells would be good. It would be good to infect its cells and kill them and make more viruses just to propagate the virus.
Well, see, this is an assumption that you're trying to put on it, okay? You're trying to attach an assumption on it, okay? The
viruses do.
So the virus that is originally from a bat does not infect the bat. It benefits the bat. Now, when the virus gets into our DNA, yes, it infects us because its design doesn't coincide with our design. So the two designs mash, and then that virus actually degenerates our DNA. And that's what you see with the side effects of viruses and sicknesses.
At the fundamental level, what are humans and bats doing different that the virus reacts differently? What is the difference? Because we're actually not that far off on the evolutionary tree.
So one thing I can point out is that if me and you were to, let's just use the vampire bat, for example, right? If me and you were to drink blood, we would get sick. We would have diseases because our body does not digest blood properly as a source of nutrients. However, the vampire bat, it works perfectly for them. So maybe that ERV is triggering something in that DNA that actually allows the bat to digest the blood and get the nutrients from the blood the way that it's supposed to. See, that's the thing, is you're saying you want proof of what these ERVs did in their original host. And no, that's not my job to prove. Okay, you're the one making the claim, so you have to prove that it didn't have a beneficial function in its original host. But one thing I'd like to point out to you is viruses cannot just come into existence on their own. They have to have a host in order to come to existence. So the fact that we have viruses at all shows that this is a instance of creation, because you're not just like, viruses don't just form on a leaf. Okay, The viruses come from another creature. They have to have a host in order to breed. They have to have a host in order to survive. So the fact that they are reliant on a host means that we're looking at a symbiotic relationship between that virus and its original designed host.
I would call it more of a parasitic relationship, but yeah, if there was no life, yeah, the viruses, they wouldn't be able to replicate. They can't replicate. They're essentially rogue DNA, RNA strands that use living hosts to replicate themselves. But you're talking about a function of an ERV versus what an actual virus does. So what a virus does nothing, like a virus does nothing beneficial for the host. The only where an endogenous retrovirus becomes beneficial when its DNA code is inserted into the DNA, and then over time a function evolves. But it's not like a bat getting a virus is doing something beneficial for the bat in the short term.
No, I'm not saying in the short term. I'm saying that it's doing something beneficial for the bat in the long term. And we see that by examining our ERVs. Okay, all of our ERVs that are fixed. Remember, we're not looking at the non-fixed ones, because the non-fixed ones are the ones that come from outside sources, and they're not going to be in every single human, so that wouldn't be used as evidence anyway, right? So the non-fixed ERVs won't be able to be used for evidence anyway, because your whole basis of evidence is that we have the same ERVs as monkeys. So non-fixed ERVs do nothing for your argument. So we need to focus on fixed ERVs. The thing with fixed ERVs is, to date, every single fixed ERV that we find either has a function currently, or it had a function that we can actually resurrect. I don't know how they resurrect it. I'll actually have to ask Taylor that when we get into our debate next week, because I haven't seen the papers on that. So I would love to look into that. Keep in mind, I've only been studying ERVs for roughly like 5 days now. On Friday, I knew nothing about ERVs. After Friday, when Mark Reed brought up his argument for ERVs, I took notes and I said, I'm going to look into this and figure this out. And already I can see that that this is evidence of design. And it's not because I want there to be evidence of design. It's because when you look at viruses, what they do, where they originate from, the only answer is that they have functions because they were part of a created design.
So you understand there are professional virologists. There are people who have spent decades and decades studying this. You admit that you just looked into this a few days ago, and you're saying that already you have basically debunked the established scientific consensus on ERVs. You have smashed through decades of research. You've sussed it all out. There's nothing to see here. The scientists can all go home, and they should probably stop by church on the way home and do something more productive with their time. Is that what you're saying?
Okay, so no, you're putting a lot of words in my mouth. No, not at all.
Well, that's basically what you're saying.
No. First off, I'm not just making this up. I'm reading articles from these scientists that have spent so much time studying the ERVs, like you said. Okay, I'm not just writing a fairy tale and then using that as my evidence. I'm looking at the research of scientists that have had the funding to do this research. Okay, so that's where my information is coming from.
To digest all that and understand it and be able to go through it all, because I tell you, in 4 days, I don't know how much could you really learn about anything when there's people been studying it for decades. And this is like the whole problem. Like, our fundamental approach is like, you guys will take a month and look at radiometric dating and look, we just debunked radiometric dating. It doesn't work. There you go. When there's people who actually spend decades and decades using this, studying this, they know how it works. They know all your objections to them are infantile and silly. And it's akin to a flat earther trying to poke holes in the globe model. It just doesn't work.
Don't do that, dude. Yeah. Don't do that. Don't do that. All right. You're trying to tag something completely silly onto our arguments. Okay, don't do that. All right, that's disingenuous. All right,
your arguments are just as silly as the arguments they make.
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. Okay, absolutely not. And here's the thing. Okay, the same amount of scientists that are using ERVs as their argument for evolution is the same amount of scientists that are also using it for creation. You want to say that all of these scientists are only using ERVs for evidence for evolution. when there's tons of scientists out there that are using ERVs for evidence for creation. And I'm willing to bet you haven't read one single paper from those scientists because you don't want to know what they have to say. You only want to hear what you want to believe. Whereas I have read from both sides of the argument and combined that information together.
In 4 days, 4 days.
Conclusion.
4 days, you boiled all that down, and you're confident in your knowledge and your abilities on a subject after 4 days of research.
Well, I mean, what I would recommend to you is to get Donnie's book on ERVs and read it. Okay, you could probably read it in 4 days. I don't know how fast you can read, but that's a pretty comprehensive book.
I read
so
very
everyone
slow,
out there,
very slow. I'm not all that smart, so I like.
Yeah, so for everyone out there, I just got to plug Donnie's book. So go buy his book, and then if y'all buy enough of them, maybe I get a percentage. You know,
I was waiting for one of his books to come out in PDF format that I never saw come out. What was that last book you had out, Donnie?
You know what, James? Just for you, I'll send you a free ERV PDF because you've been so generous with your time. Both of you get a free
review. We'll
ERV
review it
PDF.
on the channel. We'll let you know what we think of it, and maybe
Sounds
we can bring
like
Maybe we can bring Dr. Dan on and have ourselves a fun time.
Oh, that would be fun.
Like
see, I actually like Dr.
promotion.
Dan. All right, I will admit that I like Dr. Dan. Okay, he's very respectful. He's very cordial, and so I respect him.
Certainly is.
Now, James, I just want to mention I've been a little harsh on you in this debate. Okay, and I apologize for that. But the reason I've been that harsh is because I've watched several of your debates, and you have a very hard time respecting the opposing side of the debate. So I figured if I jump on it before you can even jump on it, then maybe you'll
listen. I'm not ever trying to be belligerent or disrespectful.
That's exactly what you do in every debate. So I figured if I come off hard enough, then maybe you'll back off, and it seemed to work because
if I'm debating someone I consider to be a bad faith actor, that's a little bit different. I don't really consider you to be a bad faith actor. I think that you are just somebody who has bought into a narrative, and you're doing what you can to prop it up. It is what it is. But I don't think you're the source of all this, so I don't.
Right. I just wanted to let you know that I'm normally not. Yeah, I just wanted to let you know I'm normally not this aggressive. Okay, we could be friends outside of the debate, but once we step in this circle, we're boxing.
You're fine.
You know what I mean?
Fine, Jamie.
So,
gentlemen, let me recommend something.
I would do it again.
So I am looking at the timer. You guys have been comprehensive. We've discussed numerous topics, and we did just hit the hour mark in terms of the discussion. So either we can move to closing statements and then have some fun with the audience Q&A, or we can allow a final 5 minutes for Jamie to pick up a final topic. I'm going to leave it up to you, gentlemen. What would you
I'm
prefer?
ready for questions.
Okay.
You want to make your 5 minute closing and then go?
Yes. Yeah, so
let's
James,
do closing statements.
James, you started, and so we're going to give you 5 minutes to wrap up your thoughts and points. This has definitely been fun. It's flown by. Been a very lively back and forth, and so I appreciate the energy and the passion coming from tonight's guests. So, James, we're going to give you 5 minutes, which means to the audience, we have 10 more minutes to send in your questions, although I do have more than enough currently to keep us busy anyways. So, James, 5 minutes, whenever you're ready, the floor is yours.
Well, thanks. So, this topic, broadly creation versus evolution, it's so big and there's so many things to talk about. You could probably break this down into 100 different micro debates, talk about each and every issue by itself. But broadly speaking, looking at the whole picture, so we come, those who accept evolution science, we come to the position we come to by examining reality and trying our best to figure out what's happening, trying our best to bend reality or bend our will, bend our preconceived notions to reality. Whereas they come from the exact opposite. They come knowing the truth, knowing what they believe, and they try to force reality to fit that, and just doesn't fit. And their job is to make it look like it fits, to basically put perfume on that pig, make it look like it fits so that they can continue with the believing and the praising and the loving. And look, you could be a Christian and still accept science. There are billions of Christians who do accept science, who are fine with evolution. It's not a impediment to their faith. It's only an impediment to the faith of the young Earth side, the people who, I guess they don't have enough faith to deal with both reality and their religious convictions. But yeah, everything we see in the natural world points to evolution. Everything we see in the fossil record, the story of life on Earth, they don't like it, but yet it's still in the rocks. Radiometric dating still works, and ERVs are still evidence for common ancestry among hominids, humans with the other hominids, and in fact with other forms of life. And it's funny, you can go back, and the further back you go, the less related we are, the less of these we share. And it always lines up perfectly with evolutionary theory. It didn't have to. It didn't have to be that way. It could have been that, we share more ERVs with this than that, if that's how God wanted to do it. But it's funny that he arranged the fossil record in such a way. He put ERVs there. He used viruses as these design features. And it just kind of makes it all look like we evolved now. Why would he do that? Why would he want to deceive us? Why would he put stars that are billions of light years away and then create the light on the way to us to make it look like it took billions of years for the light to get here? Almost seems like he's trying to be deceptive, or reality is just reality and things are just the way they are. These processes we see are unguided. There's no goal. There's no such thing as devolution. Life is just evolving. It's changing. It doesn't have a goal. Okay, it's an unguided process, and it is what it is. We can't create life in the laboratory yet. He brought that up, but we're working on it. But it's not to say that we've done no progress on that, in that avenue. It's not that we've gotten it there yet. It's that we have made significant progress. We have created amino acids in the laboratory. It's a long way from life. But proof of concept, we can get the ball rolling. Now, if you had no way to generate organic compounds from inorganic compounds in the laboratory, that would be a serious impediment. How these compounds came to life, we don't exactly know yet. But as everything that we've ever found in reality, every answer
Oh, we were doing well there for a little while, but we just hit the 4-minute mark for James and his closing statement. James, you have frozen up on us. And so while we wait for you to refresh, we will, well, firstly, I'll let the audience know that we do have a lot of questions, and also thank you for the super chat. For example, Can in Christ, thank you very much for the super chat and support. Sunflower, appreciate it. And anybody else who's not really a question, but just some comments, feedback, you guys are the life and blood of this channel, and so I really do appreciate it. Jamie, again, for anybody who wasn't here earlier, because we do have 100 people in the chat right now, we do have the round 2, the much anticipated round 2, isn't that right, Jamie? Between Jamie and Taylor. So they're going to be debating Cladomonas. Yeah, I'm looking forward to it, Jamie. I know the audience is as well. It's going to be a ton of fun. And so we told you we wanted to reschedule it sooner rather than later. And so it is next week on the 17th. Also wanted to thank everybody. We have hit over 2 million views and we're over 16,000 subscribers right now. And so I want to thank everybody for the support and just for sharing this content around. The reason why we host so many debates is because I think it's a good idea. Critical thinking is important, of course, but it's always a great idea to get out of our theological echo chambers, our scientific echo chambers, whatever positions we hold to, and step into the debate octagon, whether it's a debate or discussion, and discuss these differences. I think that's important in order to determine truth and come to the truth. So, James, good to have you back.
I'll tell you what.
No worries. It gave me a good reason to give some reminders and announcements. So am I coming in okay?
Promotion. Yeah, you are.
It's like we planned it. So did you want to finish? You still had a minute left to wrap things up. It's up to you.
Well, yeah, I would just say that if you want to, what was the last thing that you heard? What was the last thing you heard, if you remember?
Jamie, do you remember what the last thing you heard, he was saying was? I can't really
the last thing I wrote down is we can't accept reality. Creationists don't want to accept reality. That's the last thing I heard.
Okay. Well, yeah, I think that's pretty fair. You guys don't want to accept reality. The reality is you don't need iron to make a star. That I saw that in your first video that you did, Dismantling Evolution, Stellar Evolution. There's no chicken and egg problem. You don't need iron to make a star. Iron is synthesized in stars, and as soon as they begin to make iron, it actually kills the star. It's a star killer. So you could have a star perfectly fine without iron. We have heavier elements in the sun because the sun is a third-generation star. Certain planets rotate backwards because our solar system did not form as a result of the Big Bang. Our solar system came about as a result of processes that happened billions of years later. So why one planet rotates one way and one moon the other has nothing to do with the Big Bang. No conservation of angular momentum. This is all nonsense. But you can find all those rebuttals very easily on Google. So, I mean, I would suggest you look into those claims a little bit more. Thank you.
Okay, James W., thank you for that 5-minute concluding statement. Jamie, we've got your 5-minute concluding statement now. And on your first word, I'll hit that timer. Go ahead.
Yeah, so he brought up a lot of points that we didn't really get to discuss. However, I have something that I want to cover for my closing statement. In the Bible, Luke 19, verse 39 and 40, it says, "And some of the Pharisees from among the multitude said unto him, Master, rebuke thy disciples. And he answered and said unto them, I tell you that if these should hold their peace, the stones would immediately cry out." So that is what we see in the fossil record. The fossil record is crying out and telling us that no matter how much you reject God, his judgment came on the earth once and it will come on the earth again. Now, a lot of people don't like to hear about the flood because they think that, oh, God is so evil because he wiped out the whole world with the flood. But I want y'all to know this. Although God is the one who brought the flood, we are the ones who caused it. We had become so polluted by our sin that all flesh was corrupted. And this is what caused the judgment of God to come down on the creation. God promised not to flood the earth again, but that doesn't mean we won't face judgment again. So as much as you deny him and hide in the dark and pretend he doesn't exist and mock him, you will have to bow before him and face the judgment. Now, for those who choose to reject God, just know that one day your judgment will come. This is why I do what I do. It's not to become rich and famous, obviously, because if that was my goal, I would do the exact opposite of what I'm doing right now. Many people hate me and my ministry because they don't want to hear the truth. So I'm not doing this to become rich or famous. So why do I do this? The reason I do this is because I know we will all face judgment. And right now there's billions of people who will stand before God guilty and not have the proper payment for their sin. The Bible says the wages of sin is death, but the gift of God is eternal life. It's so simple. We have sinned, but Jesus chose to be the payment for our sins. All we need to do is accept his payment on our behalf. There are some people that don't want to do that, and that's fine. That's your freedom of choice, but you won't get away from the judgment because you rejected the person that's going to pay for that judgment. So I choose to endure the hate because the thing that keeps me up at night is the fact that so many people are currently on the path to hell, and I haven't done nearly enough to reach them. So forgive me if you don't like to hear the truth, James, but if the truth is that you can be freed from the bondage of your sin and you can be spared from an eternity of torment, then I'm sorry, but I'm going to tell the truth. I'm going to shout it from the rooftops until my last breath. You can still be saved. It's not too late. And I hope that you do, because the last thing I want to do is stand before God on Judgment Day and have to witness against you. And I'll close my argument statement with that. Amen.
Jamie, thank you very much for that closing statement. James and Jamie, excellent job. Fun debate, fast paced. energetic, and so I do appreciate that. To the audience, if you love the creation versus evolution debates, we have many more for you in the next month or two, and most of those should be set on the channel sometime in the next week. So stay tuned. If you're not yet subscribed, make sure to hit that subscribe button. Of course, we have other topics mixed in as well. I know people like the soteriology topics, dispensationalism topics. And so next week we have, is dispensationalism biblical? So pastors Daniel Eldridge and Scott Clem. This weekend we'll be back here for a King James debate. King James error debate, is unicorn the wrong translation? So that's Nick Sayers and Turretin Fan. And we did just get this debate rescheduled. Pastor Chuck, Steve Christie, is prayer to Mary and the saints worship. So lots to look forward to. And James and Jamie, break time is over. Question.
Post-trib still getting wrecked on live on Standing for Truth.
hey, say that first part, James. You kind of cut out again.
I said post-trib still getting wrecked.
Post-trib
on SF.
I appreciate that jab at my new book.
Ouch.
Hey, that's why I have James, who's got a good sense of humor. So, okay, well, here we go.
Post-tribber too, Jamie?
Yes.
Okay,
yes.
so
Post-trib,
I could
he's jabbing at
I could put my Christian hat back on and come debate that too.
Sixth seal. We're here for the 6 seals, and then after that, good luck with 7 and on, buddy.
When James converts to Christianity one of these days, I will make sure he's post-trib. So with that, all right. Oh, you got your tech guy in the mix too.
The tech guy is back.
So it's a 2 versus 1 now. Jamie, can you take
a little
2?
Disadvantaged. There you go.
Rumors are your tech guy is a creationist, James. So it might be 2-on-1, Jamie and your tech guy versus you. Okay, well, first question comes in from
Catch treats. He'll love you.
Okay, here we go. Nakia Boyer. Question for both. And I'm just starting right at the beginning. So basically 2 hours ago. What are your thoughts on cold-blooded animals evolving into warm-blooded? I haven't heard how it's possible by an evolutionist and why it's not from a creationist. Thank you both. Thank you, Nakia. Why don't we start with James, since Jamie just ended with his closing statement. James, the floor is yours.
Well, how that exact transition happened, that's something I haven't really studied. Of course, everything's possible from a creation standpoint. You just poof and God does it. He makes some animals warm-blooded, some animals cold-blooded, because that's just how he did things. How that specific transition happened, where that broke apart, I'm not sure, to be honest, on that. I would have to do some more research on that. But yeah, it's something I'd definitely be willing to look into.
Thank you, James. Jamie, over to you.
Well, I mean, as far as creation goes, he finally said something right tonight. You know, really it comes down to creation. You know, God created them that way. I haven't done too much research into it, but I believe there are some species that can interchange, if I'm not mistaken. So what I would recommend is that if you want to prove this evolved, probably start with those species and see what you can find from that study. However, I don't see anyone touching that topic, so I'm guessing y'all just don't want to know the answer to it or what. But yeah, I would say it probably just comes down to the fact that it was designed that way.
I'm sure there's a robust explanation from the scientific community. I just haven't looked into it yet. But
okay, gentlemen, appreciate the responses. Centurion 737, question for James. Why did it take scientists almost 3,000 years to get caught up with the Bible regarding washing their hands under running water, diseases, as found in the book of Leviticus?
Well, that's funny. Didn't Jesus say that nothing you put in your mouth can hurt you? Didn't Jesus say that was all just the idle babblings of the Pharisees and the legalists that he was constantly battling against? Yeah. Okay, so maybe they talked about that in Leviticus, but we came along with the germ theory of disease. It does actually a lot better. We actually know a lot more about diseases, and yeah, washing your hands, probably a good idea. Maybe they were able to figure that out. Maybe they realized if you're out shoveling animal dung and you got that on your hands, you probably don't want to eat before you wash that off. Doesn't seem to be too hard to figure that out. But anyway.
James, appreciate the response. Jamie, over to you.
So this is another classic example of what we saw earlier. He says, where's the predictions from creation? And then when we show him predictions that were proven right, he says, oh, well, you know, of course there's going to be times where the Bible's not completely wrong. No, dude, this is a testifiable prediction that the Bible made. And now that it's common knowledge, you want to dismiss that the Bible predicted it first. The other thing he said was he likes to make the reference to the goat herders, to the shepherds, right? But dude, you say you read the Bible, and if you say you read the Bible, then you should know the Bible is not written by goat herders. It's written by kings, scholars, doctors, okay? It's not just shepherds, all right? So grow up and quit lying.
Thank you, Jamie. James, you get the last word. Question was for you.
The patriarchs seem to be pretty concerned as often as they write about their goats, but yeah, the people who claim that they wrote it later on, of course, we don't actually know who wrote large chunks of it, especially in the Old Testament, because, yeah, most of it was contrived history that was written centuries after the time you think that it was written. So me coming at it from a skeptic standpoint, I'm not saying that each and everything in the Bible is wrong. I'm not making that claim. Bible was written by ancient man. Ancient man was not dumb. It's not that they knew nothing about the world. They just don't know as much as we know today. So I'm not saying everything's wrong, but he's the one who's got to say everything's right, which actually before he kind of admitted, yeah, there's certain things in there that aren't scientific. So if we can prove it to be false, he's okay with that part not being scientific. But if it's not testable, if you can't prove it wrong, then we just assume it to be true. Or you'll go to hell.
Okay, thanks for the final word, James. Next question is for Jamie. Question from Creationist Crybaby. Jamie, the Arctic fox and the tundra's pterygium, guessing the P's silent in that one, a specific bird, both undergo seasonal changes of color from dark to white. Explain the selective pressures that allowed their survival.
So this goes back to design and what we were talking about earlier with variations, okay? The gene pool has variations. I never denied that. Neither does just about any other creationist out there except for Bubblegum Gun. And if he's listening, you're wrong, Bubblegum, okay? There is variation in the gene pool. So the fact that they changed from dark to white isn't proof for evolution, okay? That is a minor variation, okay? If you want to prove evolution, you need to show something like an animal that is dependent on gills in the water evolving into a bird with lungs or something around those nature, okay? If you want to prove evolution, we need to see macro evolution evidence, all right? What they're doing here is they're trying to show a variation that is a minor variation that has no effect on the creature itself. Whether that creature is dark or white doesn't make a difference except for that it blends into its environment more. So yeah, this is just variety within the design.
Thank you, Jamie. James, floor is yours.
So really all we're saying is we're taking that same mechanism, that same variety, okay, and we're just extrapolating that out over time. And it does produce macroscopic changes. It doesn't have to. If the environment is static, the environment will select for an animal to stay relatively the same. That's why we have these living fossils. You know, the American alligator, you look back a million years ago, probably look very similar. You go into the future, it's an apex predator in its environment. Doesn't need to change. Mutations will get filtered out. But when you have large-scale changes to your environment, the environment will select and can produce these large-scale changes over time. And that's what we see in the fossil record.
Thank you, James. Jamie, question was for you. Get the last word.
Yeah, so a great way that I would describe variations to someone that maybe isn't that scientifically literate is I would say, imagine a person like Donnie, who's, you know, skinny, and he wants to get more muscular. He'll go to the gym, he'll work out, he'll get buffer, right? Okay. But guess what? He didn't actually change. He just advanced his physique within the limitations of his design. Never will him working out at the gym create wings. As much as we want wings, it'll never create wings. As much as we want a tail, it will never create a tail. There is limitations within those varieties. Just like if I don't work out, I don't exercise, I don't eat right, I will gain weight. That doesn't mean that I am now a new creature. I'm still a human being. Okay. There's limitations to variation. And it's so obvious to see in nature, but yet you and all the other evolutionists want to reject that obvious observation.
I don't know. Donnie looks pretty buff. I think he probably does spend a decent amount of time in the gym. Yeah.
I've been trying to grow wings for the last 20 years at the gym.
There you go.
Dude, I dream of wings, right? If I dream long enough, it'll evolve, right?
My co-host has the limitation that she's unable to get pregnant, but she's not going to stop trying.
Okay, gentlemen. Actually, Jamie, if you wanted a quick final word, question was for you. Go ahead.
No, that's good. I had my last word. We're good.
All right, guys.
Donnie, it's ptarmigan, by the way.
Ptarmigan.
Yeah.
There we go. Did you just look that up?
No. I just forgot to correct you because I didn't want to forget my point.
Cool. Okay, here we go. Next question comes in from Sea Science Film Labs. Question for James W. So he's coming at you, James. If the commonalities between animal forms are proof for the belief that all life shares a common ancestor, then are the differences proof that they are not related ancestrally?
Well, no, that's exactly what we would expect. If we go back in time, when we look through the fossil record, we see less differences. We see more similarities. When we look at animals that lived in the recent past, they're much more like animals today than animals we look at maybe 1 million, 2 million, or 500 million years ago. It's the story of life on Earth, and as the great Snake Was Right said, it's actually a picture almost, or a movie. Because what is a movie? It's frames of pictures put sequentially. Now the frame rate's not always super high, and there may be some gaps, but the story that it tells is unmistakable. And it is what it is. The fossil record is there. It's recorded in the rocks. It cries out for evolution. Unfortunately, it doesn't cry out for a God.
Thank you, James. Jamie, floor is yours.
There's not really too much to be made off of that point. Yeah, they're going to say that differences prove common ancestry, and then they're going to say differences prove that that they eventually split off. But again, this is all assumptions, all right? They're basing this, as he said, on the fossil record. And when we look at how they determine the fossil record, it's completely designed on evolutionary assumption. Just like when we look at reconstructions, evolutionary assumption. Just like when we look at radiometric dating. I didn't say carbon dating earlier. I said radiometric dating. That means all of them. They're all based on evolutionary assumptions. If you remove those evolutionary assumptions and just allow the data to speak for itself, it no longer shows the data. The data no longer shows the conclusions that you want it to show. And that's all I'm going to say on that.
Wow. Jamie, thank you. James, question was for you. Get the last word.
Raw data is malleable, and people can twist and interpret it in multiple different ways. And that's one reason the creationists love the field of genetics so much, because it's just data on paper, and they feel kind of safe in there as opposed to the hard fossil record. It's a record of life on Earth. It really does exist. I know it's very hard for them to refute, but yeah.
Okay, next question comes in from Taylor K. Thank you for the question, Taylor. Question is for James. What came first, the DNA to code for proteins, or the proteins needed for transcription for mRNA and translation for the polypeptides?
you talk about origin of life research on that. So which came first? Well, RNA came first. If you're talking about origin of life, where do I go on that? I tend to think it's going to be some variant of the RNA world hypothesis. So into that, these self-replicating polymers would have assembled themselves. They would be RNA based. And so you probably would have the proteins coming first from amino acids that would have assembled themselves into RNA. How that process happened, I'm not well versed on. Origin of life research is a completely different layer than evolution. Evolution is a force in nature. It takes place. We see it, by the way, not just in life, we see it all over, how tiny changes in the short term, large changes in the long term, method of a process, how these initial compounds formed. But what you can't really debate is what happens once life forms.
Okay, James, thank you very much. Jamie, if there's anything you'd like to add, floor is yours.
Yeah, first thing I'd like to add is I think it's amazing that 12-year-old girl just stumped you with that question. That was just fantastic. Beautiful. Good job, Taylor K. If you ever want me to be a guest on your show, I will gladly come on your show and answer as many questions as I can. The other thing I wanted to point out is I think it's hilarious that all throughout this debate, James is basically trying to put intelligence into evolution, and he doesn't even see it. It's hilarious. It's literally the words are coming out of his mouth, and he still doesn't see what he's saying. He's saying evolution could have done it this way. Evolution. He's adding intelligence into evolution, but yet he wants to reject an intelligent designer. And I just wanted to point that out for the audience because I think it's hilarious. How can you deny an intelligent designer, but then try and claim that evolution had intelligence to bring forth all of these changes? So that's all I'll say about that.
James, you get the last word.
Thank you for your question. So it's not intelligence. It's not a goal. It's a unguided, messy process that produces lots of things that don't work. It's kind of just throwing things against the wall and seeing what sticks. That sounds messy, and it is what it is. But we are the result of the people, of the successful experiments. We are the ancestry of survivors, people who beat the odds, who lived in conditions that were much harsher than we live today. They beat the odds, they survived, and they were able to reproduce. And here we are today based on that. But it's a long, messy process with lots of death and suffering in the process. So, no, not intelligent.
Okay, thank you very much. Next question comes in from Stephen Tibbetts, and he's got a question for W. James W. Forensics is used. I'm guessing that's what the W is. So forensics is used to validate Evo science. Forensics tests and observes bullets, blood, splatter, fibers, etc. Where does evolution test and observe?
Well, you want to talk about like testable predictions. So we get evolution, and we can predict. It was predicted before we found Archaeopteryx that we would find an animal in that about that time period with certain features in its wings. And we looked and we found that animal. We found Tiktaalik. We found an animal that is the intermediary stage between fish and amphibians. Because as you well know, the farm model of fish, amphibians, reptiles, mammals, the order of evolution on the planet is what we see. It bears out in the fossil record. So we have these species that, seem to fit exactly what we were looking for. Then we found the Australopithecines that seem to fit between other primates and humans. We didn't have to find all these, but we did find them. And we found animals like dinosaurs that we don't have any references to anywhere. These animals were all on Earth at the same time. Jamie's goat herder, they wrote extensively about all these animals that were around us, extensively about goats, all these other animals that were local to the area. They didn't write about dinosaurs. maybe a couple very vague references, but the coolest, most amazing animals in existence barely got a mention. And yeah, so the testable predictions are what counts in science, and evolution has them. We look, we find.
Zach's laughing at the same reason I'm laughing. You kind of broke up there for a while. Like you went full robotic mode, and then came in, and all I heard was goat herder. So
yeah. That's the important part of it, Donny. That's the important part of it.
I think James is calling you a goat herder, Jamie. What do you got to say to that?
Hey, I will gladly have myself a little farm of goats and live very happily out in the country. All right. So I have no problem with that.
It's about the testable predictions, though. It's we predicted before we found Archaeopteryx that we would find an animal in that time period with these features. They predicted they would find Tiktaalik. They found Tiktaalik. We predicted that we would find a link between humans and other primates. We found them. Australopithecus sediba, Afarensis, Africanus. Yeah. Evolution makes predictions, and we look in the ground and we find these animals, and yeah, it is what it is. It's reality.
You came in good there. Actually, no cutting out. So, Jamie, if you wanted to respond to anything, go ahead.
So one thing I'd like to point out is he listed a couple fossils there that are their authenticity is up for debate. So that could be a whole nother debate on its own. You know, fossil fakes and frauds. But the main thing I wanted to talk about was he said that they make predictions, and then based on those predictions, they go out and find results to confirm their predictions. But when you actually do the research and study what they're claiming and what they're finding and all of that, you find out that they find something first, then they create an evolutionary prediction, and then they claim that they found it. So no, your whole process is backwards, okay? You're finding things, putting an evolutionary depiction or evolutionary interpretation on that, and then you're saying we predicted it. And no, that's not how it works. Okay, predictions means you predict it first and then you go out and find it, and that's not what we find at all.
Well, that's exactly how religion works. Now, I don't know if you're disputing the fact that these animals were predicted before they were found. We could certainly go through that, and that is a mini debate in and of itself. These a few frauds have found their way into the science at various times. We've discovered them and we fixed them. We don't use Nebraska Man anymore. We have no problem taking it out. So if you have evidence that a fossil is fraud, present it, we'll fix it. We updated the Lucy when we realized that there was a bone in there that shouldn't have been in there. They had no problem fixing it. And yeah, that's how science works. Sometimes we find things we didn't expect. That does happen too, but we do make testable predictions.
Okay, thank you for the final word. Next question comes in from Can in Christ. Question for James. The Greek word pistis, faith in the Bible, is defined as good faith, trust, and reliability. Is that what you have in order to believe in evolution, faith and trust?
I would say no. I don't believe that you need faith to believe in evolution. I think you just need to be willing to look at reality and come up and with the most reasonable, accurate model that accurately describes what we're seeing in reality. And for me, for what as most scientists think, the evolutionary model does a great job of that. It describes what we see. It makes testable predictions. It doesn't rely on magic. If your model relies on magic, chances are it needs some work to do, because we've never found or confirmed anything that relied on magic. Every answer we've ever found was naturalistic. That's happened 100% of the time. We've never needed magic. We've never needed a deity to have anything happen. We haven't answered all the questions, but religion has answered 0 questions.
Okay, thank you, James. Jamie, anything you'd like to add?
Yeah, evolution is purely based on faith. Regardless of what you want to say, you can't observe it. All right, you've never observed one animal evolving into another animal. You say it takes millions of years, but you'll never observe it, which means that you have yourself a paradox. Okay, you have yourself a question that you technically can never have the answer to without disproving the question. So therefore, yes, evolution is completely based on faith. Now, what's interesting about that is lately I've been seeing a lot of these evolutionists in debates that try and define the scientific method based on philosophy, because that's the only way that they can get a definition of the scientific method that fits with their way that they use evolution. And what's really interesting about that is that according to northampton.edu, philosophy is not science. Science is grounded in mathematical precision and experimentation, while philosophy is more expansive dialogue and argument focused on reality, knowledge, ethics, beauty, and logic. So essentially, they're trying to define evolution by a philosophical definition. So they don't even understand what they're doing here, but what they're doing is they are pushing a philosophy. And guess what? Philosophies require faith.
James, get the
So if
last
you mean
word.
philosophy in terms of like using reason and logic, which I guess do originate from philosophy, sure, we do use reason and logic to deduce likely information from the natural world. But in what we observe microevolution. We see it happening. We see these small changes, and then we look in the fossil record. We see organisms in the past that were vastly different from today. We look at the age of the Earth. Doesn't take a whole lot to put two and two together and connect the dots and see what's happening here. Life is changing constantly, and over large, vast periods of time, these changes are producing different organisms, and that's a totally reasonable interpretation of the reality, the data, and it doesn't require magic. It just requires the natural world, natural processes. That's all that we need.
James and Jamie, we've made our way to the end of the audience Q&A as we've hit the 2.5 hour mark. So I appreciate your time. Great debate. To the audience, as always, I appreciate all the questions, feedback, side chat debates going on. Very lively audience. Sunflower has sent in a last minute super chat, so we will sneak this in. This is bonus material now, an after credit scene with Sunflower. Appreciate the $10 super chat, and we'll work through it together. So he says, if we don't live in a purely causal physical chain, then the concept of the supernatural is completely viable. Pick one. Either the universe or everything is paradoxical, or the supernatural is viable. James, obviously more so directed at you, so feel free to respond.
I mean, is the supernatural viable? I mean, we just don't have any evidence of it. We don't have any reason to think that it exists. Everything that we see, everything that we have found a cause for has been a naturalistic cause. We have nothing to base that on. And if past is prologue, we expect that we'll continue to find all we've been finding. When we do find a cause or reason for the things that we haven't yet found a cause for, it would seem to indicate that it's probably going to be a naturalistic cause. You're welcome to argue for the opposite, that, well, when we get to origin of life, origin of the universe, that's when we need the magic. That's when you have to bring God in. You're fine. You can make that case. You just don't have anything to really base that on. So thank you.
Okay, to be fair, we'll get 2 bonus questions for the after credit scene. So, Ken Rock, this one's to you, Jamie. It's appropriate. I believe we're in the beginning stages of setting up a hopeful Ken versus Jamie debate in the future. So he's asking, I need to know how Jamie, he's not going to be able to fall asleep tonight until he knows what you think, Jamie, about the flick flack spider without evolution.
Well, I'm glad I could affect someone so impactfully. I personally have not heard anything about the flick flack spider, so I guess I would have to do some research.
I did just Google it, and all the images that popped up, I'm probably going to have some nightmares tonight. So
yeah, so what I'll do is because I believe that we were actually in the works of trying to reach out to Ken Rock for maybe being another contestant on the Take On Studio 215 challenge. So what I'll do just for you, Mr. Ken Rock, is I will spend all weekend researching Flick Flack Spider, and then you schedule a debate specifically on that one topic with whatever talking points you think prove evolution regarding the spider. And we will do a whole debate on just that one creature.
You'll become an expert in 2 days. There you go.
It'll be the big, much anticipated Flick Flack Spider debate. Creation Revolution, Ken Rock versus Jamie. So, okay, there we go, gentlemen. We've concluded the debate. So, Jamie, James, appreciate both of you doing this. Why don't we have some quick final words, final thoughts? Because, James, I understand you're having an open mic or an after show tonight. Jamie, you've got a couple debates coming up. So if you wanted to give those a couple shout outs, plug your channels, whatever you guys got to do, because I do appreciate your time for these debates. So, James, let's start with you. Thanks for doing this. Yeah. Final word, final thoughts.
I'll be heading right over to the after show right after this. We'll get that going. It'll be open mic. So people come on and let us know what you think. The good, the bad, the ugly. Let us know what you think about the debate. And you and Jamie are welcome to come on. We'll give you your intros. We'll let you speak your piece. We won't mute you, kick you. We'll just interact with you.
Okay, James, I can testify to that. I've been in your open mics before and always a lot of fun. So definitely check out James's channel, please, to the audience. Jamie from the Studio 215 YouTube channel, thanks for doing this. Final words, final thoughts.
Yeah, so this was an entertaining debate. This was one of the names that I wanted to check off on my list, so I'm glad for that. I do have a lot of stuff going on my channel. I have the Evolution Exposed video series. We're also doing the weekly Bible studies. I have a Discord channel for a good area that we can all converse without the threat of censorship. I have a website that I'm building that will have a much larger video library. That way we don't have to follow the guidelines of YouTube and all the other platforms. So a lot of things are in the works. I would definitely recommend go sub to the channel, Studio 215 Official. More than likely, it seems like a lot of the people that I normally talk to in my Discord are on the live stream right now. So if anyone's interested, we might have ourselves a little fellowship for maybe 30 minutes to an hour on my Discord. So if y'all want to come talk on the Discord, feel free. All you got to do is go to one of my YouTube videos. The Discord link is in all of the descriptions. And then you just go and join. You talk with us. As long as you're respectful, you won't get kicked.
All right, Jamie, thanks for the final words, final thoughts to the audience. If you like what you've seen from these debaters tonight, check the description box for the relevant links. And with that, we are going to wrap things up. Again, thank you to the debaters. Thanks for making for an engaging, fun debate. Donnie is out. God bless all.